We already have nukes in Turkey. We already have the 3 countries up in the Baltics. Like, is Ukraine going to be, that's the domino that we invade Moscow through? Like, is that really a thing you think is going to happen? That Russia's going to be invaded by a NATO country? Why are you just saying random stuff? In 2000, I don't care. I'm just curious. Do you think that NATO will, or any NATO country will actually invade Russia? I don't want a quote or a news poster. Yeah, what is it?
In 2008, Russia said...
Are you fucking serious?
Connor.
Jesus Christ! The U.S. didn't launch the war. Russia did.
Imagine if the country becomes destabilized and impoverished, and they do feel they are pushed into a corner, and they do feel like they have to defend themselves. They have made this clear that they will do that. So
defend themselves against what?
Against being attacked.
Well, who's attacking them?
Well, up until again, you had.
Who's attacking them?
No one's attacking Russia. That's the whole point.
Are you guys okay with me just having a 12-minute running time, and then you guys will split it between each other, or do you want me to have 6 minutes and then 6 minutes?
Probably do 6 each, just make it a little easier.
Right.
Adam's doing the lion's share of our opening statement, so.
Yeah, well.
Ну закрывай тогда шторку.
Okay.
Dude, I didn't make anything at all. Fuck me. Where did my one dot go? I deleted it. Oh, Russia provoked? Oh, fuck. Is that the debate topic? Oh, shit. Oh, my God. Make it stop. Holy fucking shit.
People of the internet, welcome to Modern Day Debate. Tonight, we are debating, was Russia provoked by the U.S. and / the West? We have an extra special debate tonight produced in association with DylanBurns TV. Dylan is joining us tonight as my co-moderator. He will be the primary moderator for tonight's open discussion. Dylan, do you have anything you want to say? Or are you even there? Oh, no, he's not there. In the meantime, I will just like to say that tonight, all the super chats will be going to a special charity for research for the terminal disease known as Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome. So if you have any kind of super chats, super stickers, anything you want to say tonight, please feel free to send it, as we'll be donating 100% of the super chats to that charity tonight, and that is linked in the description below as well as all of our interlocutors tonight. They will all be linked in the description. If you'd like what you're hearing, you can check them out as well. So going first tonight, we have Connor and Justus crossing swords with Destiny and AdamSomething, and we will be turning it over to them for their 12-minute opening statement. That would be Connor and Justus. No, actually, AdamSomething and Destiny are going to go first. So we'll go ahead and let them take their quick opening statements. They're not going to take the whole 12 minutes. So go ahead, Adam.
Thank you. So, the West provoked Russia to war is the statement we are here to debate tonight. Destiny and I are here to argue against it, while our opponents will be arguing for it, surely. But much like abusive spouses, aggressive imperialist dictatorships and their supporters also love playing the victim and otherwise lie, misdirect, and gaslight. The narrative our opponents will likely try to construct tonight is just that, a world where poor Russia, the victim, was forced into attacking Ukraine through circumstances created by the evil West. At the same time, they will downplay or deny every obvious Russian atrocity, blame everything on Ukraine, shift the goalposts, or maybe even peddle bunk conspiracy theories, such as the US-funded biolabs inside Ukraine. I do not envy their position. To better start us off, let's quickly review the Russian narrative regarding the invasion of Ukraine. The original claim was, we aren't planning to attack, it's just NATO fear-mongering. Then, we're only there for a military exercise with Belarus. And then, we're taking Kiev and denazifying Ukraine by liquidating its leadership of drug-addicted Bandera neo-Nazis. And then, we're only ensuring Ukraine's neutral status by demilitarizing it. And then, we want to take out the US-funded biolabs in Ukraine that produce anthrax-infected bats and further bioweapons designed to target Russian genes. And then, we just want to secure the Donbass and to protect locals from genocide. And finally, the current justification, we just want to take out the Ukrainian ultranationalist battalions. As I said, I do not envy our opponents' positions. This is quite the position to defend. Any argument they'll attempt to make will have to be made from across the smoldering ruins of Ukrainian cities, the mountains of dead civilians, and the ruins of hospitals in the midst of Russian orchestrated abductions, murder, torture, deportations, and general looting. All in all, I'll be curious to see how our opponents will try to defend the indefensible, though I don't expect any good faith engagement from them, obviously. As the saying goes, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, denies it's a duck, demands you prove it's a duck, accuses you of being a duck, says your dog is a duck, that your friend's cat is a duck, and that all three aforementioned ducks are Russophobic, it's a Kremlin duck. Thank you.
All right, thank you, AdamSomething. Destiny, would you like to take your 6 minutes for opening statement?
I would just like to say I agree with every single thing that Adam said.
And you're muted.
I'm sorry. Am I unmuted now?
Yep.
Obviously, I would like to agree with everything that Adam said. Oftentimes, when talking about the justification of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and whether or not Russia was provoked, I think that the lens is always spoken through a kind of United States and NATO versus Russia kind of framing, and I would be interested in how we can overcome the concept of Ukraine's right to defend itself. I think that Ukraine has a right to determine its own sovereignty. I think that its borders were already agreed upon with Russia, and I just don't believe that there is any real provocation that Russia can talk about when it comes to invading Ukraine. Yeah, that's all I got.
All right, thank you so much. And we'll go ahead and kick it over to Connor and Justus.
I just want to go to the back and forth, okay? Fuck this.
Whichever one of you wants to go first.
All right, that would be me. So here we go. Yeah, just 1 second here. Here we go. Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 23rd was an unjustified act of aggression. I, along with my debate partner, condemn these actions. As a citizen of Russia, a farmer in Russia, and a father of 3, holding such opinions is not exactly safe at the moment. I have spoken out both publicly on my YouTube channel as well as privately in conversations with friends and acquaintances, condemning the war, even though such opinions are currently illegal to share and punishable by up to 15 years in prison. So why would I, who am against the war, claim that the West is largely responsible for the mayhem now unfolding in the Ukraine? I believe primarily that America's disregard for the legitimate security concerns of lesser powers, in this case Russia's, puts all of us at the risk of war and potentially nuclear annihilation. What I'm about to present is the other side of the story, a story of 30 years of Western aggression, broken promises, and bad faith that, if seen from the other side, go a long way to explaining the actions of Vladimir Putin and the Russian state. Stephen Walt, professor at Harvard University and leader of the Realist School of Thought and Foreign Policy, said, "Strategic empathy is not about agreeing with an adversary's position. It's about understanding it so that you can fashion an appropriate response." The war in Ukraine is wrong, but is a rational reaction to Western antagonism, if seen from the other side. If we want to live in a more sane world, a more peaceful world, we need to learn from the mistakes of the past so as not to repeat them. If we want peace with other rising powers in the world, we need to look at our own behavior from the standpoint of the outsider. This includes facing the uncomfortable truth that the United States, that the U.S.-led Western world is largely responsible for the events unfolding now in the Ukraine. On February 9th, 1990, as the Soviet Union teeters on the verge of collapse, George Bush Sr., along with Secretary of State James Baker, promised Mikhail Gorbachev that if the USSR allows a peaceful reunification of Germany under a NATO alliance, that they would guarantee no further NATO expansion. Then West Germany, France, and the United Kingdoms all signed on to this promise. These Western powers have been denying these promises ever since, claiming that either they were never made in the first place, or that these promises no longer count because it was not in writing. To at least deal briefly with the objections, I'll refer you to the official records which were posted in 2019 at George Washington University's National Security Archive, where you can read for yourself in no uncertain terms that such promises were made by the highest officials in America. These guarantees, the hope that the West would not exploit Russia in a moment of vulnerability, are largely responsible for the almost entirely bloodless dissolution of the Soviet Union. December 26, 1991, the USSR collapses. The hammer and sickle come down from over the Kremlin. The Iron Curtain is officially rent asunder. Putin has been widely criticized in the West for claiming that the fall of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century. And although it cannot compare to the horror and bloodshed of either world wars, with these exceptions, it is second to none in human suffering and geopolitical significance in the end of the 20th century. The decade after the fall of the Soviet Union is known by all Russians as the stormy 90s. The then newly formed government of Russia hoped for help from her former adversaries in navigating the transition from a command and control, centrally planned socialist economy to a modern markets-based economy. What she received was the shock therapy economic policies of the so-called Harvard boys, which totally destroyed the Russian economy. Instead of being a good sport after the peaceful conclusion of the most dangerous epoch in history, the Harvard boys recommended the hapless Yeltsin government abolish all subsidies and price controls in the formerly completely socialist economy, causing hyperinflation, destroying all available capital for local investment, and use voucher schemes to hand over entire industries to criminal elements which created today's oligarchs. The consequences for the economy and the people of Russia were beyond what most Westerners can imagine. The 90s in Russia make the Great Depression in the United States look like good times. The country was devastated. Life expectancy fell by double digits. Russia lost over 2 million people to deaths of despair, migratory flight, brain drain, and hunger. While the economists who were recommended by the U.S. State Department wreaked havoc on the Russian economy, America also supported the Chechen separatist rebels factions.
I thought you were going to write longer openers for these panels with openers.
These are the same freedom
not for
fighters
this one anymore. I just want to get into the back and forth.
I don't want to write like another 12-minute opener for.
Yudonos hostage crisis, the Первомайsk and Kilizar terrorist attacks, the Dubrovka theater hostage incident, as well as the more well-known Beslan tragedy. In each one of these events, hundreds of Russian citizens were taken hostage and hundreds more died. Putin comes to power in 2000 and promises to bring order to the chaos of the 90s. He dealt swiftly and decisively with the oligarchs and organized crime. He reformed the tax code and rebooted the Russian economy. Regardless of the ongoing conflict with the Chechens, supported by the USA, Putin was the first foreign leader to call George W. Bush after the terror attacks of 9/11 and offer support. He made good on that offer at the beginning of the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan, where he offered support as well as use of Russian military bases in the area. This olive branch would be rebuffed by Bush-era policies that would simply be a continuation of Clinton-era military escalation. Russians began to see then, and now continue to see, Putin is the only thing that stands between them and the rapacious appetites of Wild West bankers and marauding hordes of Western-sponsored murderous terrorists. The real turning point, though, in modern U.S. and Russian relations happened in 2008. The Bucharest Declaration, a set of resolutions concluding the then NATO conference, said that NATO was willing and waiting to accept Georgia and Ukraine into membership. In 2008, William Burns, the current CIA director, was the U.S. ambassador in Russia.
It's time.
In January of that year, he met with the... Oh, there we go. My partner will now elaborate more, so take it away, Connor.
Okay. Neither Russia nor the Russians are the enemies of the American people, but the foreign policy establishment led by the neoconservatives at the end of the Cold War seized what they called their unipolar moment at the end of history to dominate the globe militarily, politically, and otherwise. The policies which they have enacted have systematically brought us to the brinksmanship we experience today. Bill Clinton, in a quest for Polish votes in the Midwest and new markets for Lockheed Martin, expanded NATO. This was fervently opposed by Clinton's own Pentagon chief at the time and the most respected foreign policy so-called graybeards among the men who led the previous Cold War. To name a few, George Kennan, Robert McNamara, Paul Nitze, Ambassador Jack Matlock, Brent Scowcroft, Robert Gates, Gene Kirkpatrick, Sam Nunn, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Bill Bradley, and John Warner. Susan Eisenhower and 50 of America's most acclaimed foreign policy leaders, including some of the above, signed an open letter urging Bill Clinton not to go through with the planned NATO expansion. Since then, both parties have continued, both American political parties have escalated a persistently hostile anti-Russian foreign policy. This began with NATO expanding in 1999 to include Hungary, Poland, and the Czech Republic. Under Clinton, the U.S. and NATO waged an illegal war in Kosovo against Russia's allies, the Serbs. The war was based on lies and began the new Cold War we are hopelessly enmeshed in today. Thousands of people were killed. The U.S. bombed the Chinese embassy in Belgrade, and NATO Supreme Allied Commander Wesley Clark nearly started World War III when he demanded Russian forces occupying the Pristina airport be bombed as well. It has also set the precedents that have been invoked by President Vladimir Putin on more than one occasion, both when he annexed Crimea in 2014 and when he began this current invasion. After the September 11th attacks, George W. Bush deliberately blew an opportunity for rapprochement with Putin, acting on the advice of people like John Bolton. He tore up the anti-ballistic missile treaty after it had held for 30 years and announced the U.S. was moving defensive missiles to Poland and radar to the Czech Republic. Part of the Bush policy was to place Aegis ashore systems at the anti-ballistic missile sites in Romania and Poland. These anti-missile missiles are fired from dual-use launchers, which can also be retrofit with Tomahawk cruise missiles that can launch H-bombs, hydrogen bombs. Now, the ABMs themselves, whether they work or not, began a new arms race, but these launchers meant the U.S. was sneaking medium-range missiles back into Europe less than 20 years after the INF Treaty was signed. Roughly a decade after Bush left office, Putin announced a whole new generation of nuclear weapons Russia had developed and made it plausible that the U.S. had completely lost this competition. Though Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden have committed the U.S. to a 30-year plan with an estimated cost of multiple trillions of dollars now to revamp and modernize America's nuclear arsenal. Bush expanded NATO to Russia's borders, including bringing in Slovakia, Slovenia, Romania, Bulgaria, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Bush also promised NATO membership to Ukraine and Georgia at the all-important Bucharest summit in April 2008. By July, the U.S. was conducting massive drills in Georgia named Immediate Response, and in August, Tbilisi had launched a war against Russia in South Ossetia, attacking peacekeepers there on an EU-brokered deal. Since 2008, 2 more wars in Ukraine have been caused by Bush's ill-advised declaration, which was staunchly opposed by Paris and Berlin. Obama ruined his own reset with Russia. He conned and made a chump out of Dmitry Medvedev at the UN Security Council and lied about the West's intentions in Libya. This practically guaranteed Putin's return to the presidency. When it was possible, he was even considering retirement. Obama also expanded NATO further into the Balkans, overthrew the government in Ukraine, sent CIA paramilitaries to Ukraine on an advisory mission to the front line in the Donbass. He had the CIA training militants at a secret base in the United States and deployed special forces to train Kiev's military. Although he chose not to arm Ukraine, Obama set the stage for the current war. Obama also began the trend of diplomatic expulsions in earnest, which was worsened by Trump and Biden. Trump ripped up the INF Treaty, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, and the Open Skies Treaty. He expanded NATO, bringing in Montenegro and Macedonia. He also beefed up the U.S. presence in the Baltic and Black Seas, often sending warships to these waters. He sent frigates to the Baltic Sea armed with medium-range cruise missiles, which reduced first strike warnings, pushing us closer to brinksmanship. And under Trump, more troops and weapons and equipment were sent to Poland and the Baltics. There were myriad NATO exercises off Russia's borders as well. He armed Ukraine. Trump escalated far beyond the Obama policy and bragged about it, sending Javelin anti-tank missiles, armed boats, rocket launchers, sniper rifles, and more to Kiev. These weapons were sent to a government that had already launched a war against its own people, killing thousands. Biden picked up where they left off and led some of the largest military exercises in Eastern Europe since the Cold War, refused to recognize Russian sovereignty in Crimea, further armed Ukraine, and drastically deteriorated relations with Moscow, leading to today's devastating war in Ukraine.
All right, that looks like it ends the opening statement. So I'm going to go ahead and just let everybody know, especially if it's their first time here at Modern Day Debates, that we are a neutral platform hosting debates on science, religion, and politics. And we want you to feel welcome no matter what walk of life you're from. And if you have a question or comment for one of tonight's debaters, fire into the old live chat. And be sure to tag me at Modern Day Debates. Super chats will go to the top of the list. And remember that tonight's super chats will 100% of the revenue will go to research for Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome. So please feel free to send as many super chats and super stickers as you'd like. And they will, of course, go to the top of the list. And all we ask is that you keep it civil, attack the argument and not the person, as insults will not be read. That goes for the general discourse in the live chat as well. Our invaluable moderators are working tirelessly to elevate the conversation. So please show them, the debaters, and each other the respect that they deserve and not hurl insults and attacks at each other. Our guests are linked in the description below, and whether you're listening on YouTube or via the podcast. So be sure to hit the like button, subscribe. We have plenty more debates coming your way. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick it to Dylan, as he is going to be taking over and taking charge of this for the open discussion portion. So Dylan, the floor is all yours.
Hi, I'm having a little bit of connection issues, so if there's any problems, I'm sure Kaz can pick up for me. But despite that, I'm going to just open it this way. Does anybody want to start us off?
I want to.
Just go from there. I love to start. You can all be polite. Yeah. Okay, Destiny, start us off.
Okay, so I just want to ask like a random question, I guess. There's like two broad claims that I find are made when we talk about Western aggression and the people that talk about Western aggression. So on one hand, people will say things like NATO expansion is the reason why Russia is feeling the need to invade Ukraine or to, establish breakaway states or whatever. But then in the next breath, I always hear people talk about like this school of realism when it comes to analyzing foreign affairs. So I'm curious for both of you. Let's say that NATO membership was not on the table whatsoever. But let's say that in a post-Yanukovych Ukraine, where Ukraine is saying, we don't want the Russian trade deals, we want the European Union trade deals, and maybe in the future, maybe we can even join the EU. If we are to believe, like a realist would, that stronger nations exert control and influence over smaller nations, wouldn't Russia have tried to invade Ukraine anyway, turn them into another Belarus? Like even without NATO expansion, isn't that still plausible that that would have happened?
I'll take that real quick. I think that, you know, many alternative universes or alternative realities are plausible in any case. But the question here is, what are the Western countries doing to make that less plausible or to live in peaceful coexistence with, for instance, Russia? So Russia has been attempting, I think we have a pretty good track record established in Eastern Europe over the last 20 years, that they're mostly interested in peaceful coexistence with their European neighbors. The red line, I think the portion of my opening statement that I did not get to in 2008, was that it was made very clear to the State Department via the what's called the Niet means Niet memo, that inclusion of Georgia and Ukraine into NATO was a flagrant red line for Russian security interests. So would Russia want to exert influence over smaller nations nearby? Yes, of course. Just like we would like to, the United States would like to exert influence over smaller nations in its own neighborhood. Would that have precipitated an invasion? I don't think so, because military power is, military expansion is met with military expansion. Economic expansion is met with economic expansion in retaliatory scenarios.
I guess your points would be more salient if Russia wasn't already engaging or having been engaged for decades in aggressive military expansion or just general fuckery around its borders. So we have the invasion of Georgia, we get a puppet state in Transnistria, we have the annexation of Crimea and the war in Donbass. Also, there's adventures also in Syria by Vladimir Putin. So Russia is a country that very clearly is not interested in peaceful coexistence with at least with its former satellite states, right? So and I guarantee you, if the Baltics weren't in NATO, Russia would have done they would have done a fucking Donbass in the Baltics. Putin is a far-right leader. He's an imperialist, of course. He's sort of drunk on this Russian imperial ambitions of the past. And if you don't think that, just from a realist perspective, that he would try to restore the former glory of his geopolitical pole, any chance he would get, then if you don't believe that, I don't know what to tell you. And then NATO is there precisely to stop this from happening, to stop Russian imperial ambitions from manifesting itself, as they did in Moldavia, Ukraine, and Georgia. So I don't know where you're getting this from, that like Russia is after peaceful coexistence in Europe, which is clearly not the case.
Yeah. Also, just to back on, and then you're going to answer, just to add on to the end of Adam's statement. So I do agree that we can't really make historical counterfactuals. Like we can't see what would have happened otherwise. But like when we look at why did Russia initially invade Ukraine in 2014, it wasn't because of NATO expansionism, and it wasn't because of the West. It was because of the ousting of Yanukovych. Right? That was like the Crimean Peninsula was taken as a response to that. So like, are we really saying that, were there no NATO expansion ideas on the table? Like, would that invasion have not happened? I find that really hard to believe. I think that militarily, I think Sevastopol and the Black Sea is really important to Russia. And I think they wanted to take that peninsula and they saw an opportunity to do so. I don't think that NATO expansion has had anything to do with it.
Well, they had a deal with the Ukrainians, the Crimean Peninsula, well, the Sevastopol base was on lease. They were allowed to have up to like 25,000 troops there. They had 16,000 at the time. And when the coup occurred, the Ukrainian forces, including 3 former presidents, advocated that the Russians be evicted violently from that base. So Putin ordered his men to walk out of their bases and seize the Crimean Peninsula, which they did without bloodshed.
What is
okay,
the source
and
for that?
again, your point,
that Russians were to be violently evicted from the Crimean Peninsula? I never remember any of this happening. What is the? I don't like to do like the source and debates, but I'm almost certain that that's not true.
All right, give me a moment.
Yeah, no problem.
But actually, even if that did happen, which I don't know if it did, but if we entertain that it did happen, then why didn't Russian soldiers just like protect their own bases? If they want to evict them from the bases, then let them stay in the bases. Plus, at that point, the Ukrainian military was like, they had 3,000 deployable troops, right? And Russia knew this, of course. This was a result of decades of systemic rot. Like, what could Ukraine even do against 16,000 Russian troops, like heavily armed, well-supplied Russian troops in Crimea? Nothing. So the fact that Russians actually came out of their military bases and took over Ukrainian government buildings in Crimea is, it's at that point the opposition to them supposedly about to be evicted from their bases is not really the reason there, right? Like it seems like they just like really wanted to get back that historic part of their empire.
Again, this is the Crimea is kind of counterfactual that we're looking for. Russia has a prime opportunity to basically annex Ukraine in 2014 if they wanted to. As AdamSomething just pointed out correctly, the Ukrainian military was in no place to pose any kind of substantial resistance to the Russian army back in 2014. And so why, if they're so hell-bent on imperialistic ambitions, on rebooting the Soviet Union, on whatever AdamSomething is afraid of, why didn't they just annex the entire country of Ukraine then and there?
The thing is, they tried.
And
they tried.
The answer to that is they didn't try. The answer to that is that they did not go that far. There was a Western-sponsored coup in Kiev in 2014, and Russia proportionally responded by seizing Crimea because the new regime in Kiev was putting their military bases and their presence in the Black Sea was threatening that. So they did not try to annex Crimea. AdamSomething will most likely point to the Donbass and Lugansk wars that started in 2014, the separatist wars there. Russia did support those militarily, much like the United States supported the Chechen rebels in the 90s against Russia. And I'm again not justifying that, but just in a Realpolitik sense, they were destabilizing what they saw as what was becoming a hostile government to them. And in 2015, when the Donbass and Lugansk republics asked to be annexed into Russia, Russia denied them that. If Russia was on such a path of imperialist expansion, why didn't they take over the Ukraine in 2014? Why didn't they annex the DNR and the LNR in 2015?
If I can make one really quick request for Adam, I'll let you. I'm not even going to respond to that. This is a really quick request. If we could, for this conversation, just because I'm a child, if we could go like back and forth on like 1 or 2 points each, that would be so nice. Instead of laying out so much contestable stuff, is what I would say. I would appreciate it. But go ahead, Adam. Go.
All right. So the questions are like, why didn't if Russia's imperial ambitions really are like sort of really are the reality, then why didn't Russia
saying
annex
so much
Ukraine,
shit that's just so fucking dumb?
Annex Donbass, Donetsk and Luhansk. So the first question, why didn't Russia annex Ukraine? Well, they were actually counting with the Ukrainian state collapsing under even the slightest duress, because it really didn't. It wasn't obvious back then that the Ukrainian state will survive, and Russia was 100%. Putin was 100% banking on the fact that the government will just collapse, and then they'll just do they'll just give the Donbass treatment to the whole country. Little people's republics here and there, and then the entire thing just falls back to Russia eventually. But oopsie daisy, they accidentally created a Ukrainian national identity in the process, which has been suppressed for decades by Soviets. So the Donbass area is actually Plan C. Plan A was the whole of Ukraine, and then that, of course, wasn't going to work. Plan B was the so-called Novorossiya project, that's from Transnistria all the way to the south coast, Odessa, Crimea, and then all the way till Mariupol, plus the Donbass, and maybe Kharkiv even. Actually, Kharkiv as well. There was Plan B, but that didn't work either. Only the east remained, so there was Plan C. And the reason at that point, the reason why they didn't annex the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics is because it was more geopolitically, from a realpolitik perspective, it was far more efficacious for Putin to not annex these territories, to use them as these sort of forward bases to destabilize Ukraine and to keep this sort of questionable, sort of contested buffer zone, to eventually try and sort of exert their influence. Back then, federalization was the name of the game. Putin tried to achieve a sort of settlement where the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics will become part of Ukraine as in a federation, where the Donetsk and Luhansk regions have a veto in Ukraine's foreign policy. So as you can see, that would have given Russia essentially control over Ukraine's geopolitical course. So that was the name of the game. This is Realpolitik. That's my answer.
Okay, so I just gave. Oh, go ahead, Justus.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, so I just dropped in the article from the Kiev Post, and there's others too, where they call to mobilize forces and to break the Kharkiv Pact, which has that lease I was talking to you about, and to intervene. Now, the issue with the Donbass, of course, is you have, because of the history of the country, you have hundreds of thousands of Russian civilians living in the region. And as Justus said, after they declared their independence, Russia did not invade. They sent in deniable clandestine forces to help them maintain their autonomy. And there were attacks on the Donbass. A war was launched. And as I said, 14,000 people were killed. And in the meantime, the U.S. government, after overthrowing the government in Kiev, after Yanukovych decided not to take the EU association agreement, there was support for that war, political and otherwise. And once Trump came into office, he started arming the country. And since then, it's become a major security risk for the people in that region. And it's also right on the border of Russia. I'm not condoning any kind of violence, but if this occurred in the United States, say in Mexico, if Russia had overthrown the government and launched supported a war against populations there of Americans on the border, and they were preparing for a war with, or even talking about going in there and just evicting those people and killing them and reconstituting an ethnic Ukraine, that would be something that the Americans would object to, because it would be a major violation of their security. But of course, we're sort of starting at the wrong point. I think that it's important to look at the past and see how this led up. I mean, again, you mentioned Georgia. Now, unfortunately, the issue is that the war occurred after Georgia was promised Ukrainian membership by George W. Bush against the wishes of Paris and Berlin. And the Georgians were given military support, and it's come out in reports that they were receiving back-channel assurances from people in Dick Cheney's orbit, and they thought that they could count on American support. And as Justus pointed out, Sergei Lavrov had already told William Burns that this was a major red line, and Burns had told Condoleezza Rice that no Russian politician, conservative or liberal, and everybody in the foreign policy establishment there, from Putin's sharpest liberal critics to the worst most backwards knuckle draggers in the dark recesses of the Kremlin, I think is basically what he says, would ever accept this. And they were concerned in Ukraine, for instance, that a civil war would break out in the event that the government tried to join NATO. And unfortunately, this is what has been promised, and successive regimes have attempted to do just this. And again, it's in the backdrop of the war against the ethnic Russians.
But why would a civil war break out over NATO membership in Ukraine?
Because the country is largely divided. They're in the Russian-speaking regions in the south and the east. These people were threatened by ultranationalist forces who supported the EU membership and also have been trying to join NATO this whole time. If you look at people like Zelensky, I mean, one of the big problems was they never gave up the promise, even when there were negotiations that could have removed that as an obstacle to peace. And they never implemented the Minsk II agreements that the Russians and the Germans and the French and the Ukrainians agreed to.
Okay, wait, just quickly. Yes. So just with regards to your previous point, if there was a civil war in Ukraine, if there was back then a civil war due to the country's NATO membership, who would start that civil war against whom?
Well, again, the ethnic Russians are being attacked. But this country has been used as a way to invade Moscow by Western powers.
So the Ukrainian ultranationalists would start a civil war against the ethnic Russians in Ukraine if Ukraine joined NATO in 2014. or earlier?
No, they already did. I'm saying that it was a threat to Russia's security.
Yeah. Okay, but how's NATO? Go ahead.
Yeah, just let me jump in right here. I think that what Connor is quoting is a section from the Niet Means Niet memoir that was written by William Burns in 2008, where he said that he assessed that might be a potential outcome. I'm not necessarily going to stand here and defend that. It may or may not have turned out that way, and it's hard to understand what the then the U.S. ambassador to Russia thought was a potential outcome with all the resources at his disposal at that time. To relitigate that at this moment, who knows? I mean, what they were thinking about, what he was focusing on then. I
think it's also weird that there's so much hypothetical stuff from Ukraine that we talk about to justify Russian aggression, but then we can't look at actual Russian aggression. So I was curious what you mentioned about you said that 3 former Ukrainian prime ministers came out to denounce the Kharkiv Pact, or the Kharkiv Pact or whatever. 3 leaders came out and said it'd be a good idea to do it, but when they tried this in 2013, it got shot down in the Ukrainian parliament. I read the thing that you linked. So this wasn't on the table, that Ukraine was ever going to go down and retake Sevastopol and kick Russia out, or they weren't going to renew the lease of the base. The idea that was a fear because there was a news article published that some people were saying they should do it by 3 people that weren't even active in parliament anymore in the Verkhovna Rada or whatever, that's just unfounded, right? Imagine that justification of invading a country because a year ago a piece of legislation to not renew a base got shot down. It doesn't make any sense. I feel like you have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to try to figure out well, maybe they invaded because of this or that or that. We know exactly why the Crimean Peninsula was taken, and it was because Yanukovych left, and it was because Russia was losing control of Ukraine. That's a very easy that's 3 steps from A to B to see exactly what happened.
Absolutely, and the new government in Ukraine in 2014 was fielding questions of fielding ideas of not extending the leases for the bases and also evicting the Russians, not in 13, but in 2014.
Sure, but would that justify?
Under the new administration,
he's going to rant for 20 minutes, dude. I hate the ranting.
Really
it's so fucking annoying. Oh God, you can never have a debate. Point. It's just how long can you schizo out your 50 fucking points?
Realpolitik in Ukraine about how things could have possibly played out, and then he says Russia absolutely did want to take Ukraine. They were waiting for the Ukraine to fall apart. That's an interesting story that has no basis in reality, or
that's what they just did.
We have no ability to prove that. You're saying this is what was in the heads of Putin or in the heads of the Russian.
Oh, sure. I mean, again, the 24th of February, they tried exactly this again, but with actual military forces directly. I'm sorry. Have you heard the news? Russia invaded Ukraine.
24th of February 2022 is not 2014. It's a different time span. It's a different.
Yes. Back then, Russia tried proxies.
A whole different scenario. But just really quick. Let's, instead of looking at some sort of ethereal theoretics, let's look at the reality of the situation. Based on the Russians and Americans or the Western play in this thing, as the United States-led Western world follows a policy of encircling Russia with active military bases. Russia works a little bit in territories on its border. And who's the aggressor here? Who's expanding military operations?
What is the NATO aggression?
That is the question. And that's the theory. That's the thing that we have to look at.
What is the NATO aggression? I'm curious. Let's play that thought experiment real quickly. What do we think is going to happen?
All right, Destiny. When was the one time in the NATO history when Article 5 was enacted? One time.
We triggered Article 5 for 9/11. What do you mean?
We triggered Article 5 for 9/11 to invade where? Afghanistan. Halfway around the world, completely out of our sphere of influence, potentially a war that we didn't need to have fought.
Hold on, I'm sorry. Do you think that triggering... Hold on.
NATO countries...
Wait. No, can we just one point by point, okay? Are you trying to say that Russia might 9/11 us and we'll trigger Article 5 for that? Or are you trying to say that another country might 9/11 us and we're going to Article 5 into Russia? Do you really believe that's a possibility?
I'm saying that as the United States, as the Western world says, NATO is simply a protective defensive alliance. It doesn't look like that from the other side.
We don't
it
have to.
like
I mean, we can look at
find
NATO
reasons
missions
and
to see
use-
this. Wait, let's engage with the point. I want to hear this. I want to hear the engagement with this point. Do you really think? Do you personally? Do you believe that there is any chance that NATO or NATO forces or NATO countries are going to be attacking Russia? That an Article 5 trigger is going to.
Do you think?
Are you literally you
So
won't engage
there
with
was
this
the interview-
because it destroys the entire argument. You know that will never happen.
I will absolutely engage with this. I will absolutely engage
Okay.
with this. No
So
problem.
will NATO invade
Oliver
Russia,
Stone
yes or no?
has an interview, has his famous, multi-hour interviews with Putin, where he brings up this exact point. Mr. Putin, don't you know that NATO is just a jobs program for the West? For the most part, it's just corporate welfare. This is never going to be used to attack Russia. Don't you understand that? And Putin says it may be that way, it may be not that way, but if you're looking at it from our side, as country after country gets integrated into the NATO system, as rocket launchers gets placed, as military bases gets moved closer and closer to our border, we have to look at this again in a Realpolitik sort of way. Put it on the other side. What if it wasn't the economic system of the Soviet Union, but the economic system of the Western world that collapsed in 1991, and that the Warsaw Pact was integrating Canada and Mexico and putting military bases on the United States border? Would the United States, with the Monroe Doctrine in place, ever tolerate that?
Why? There is no
Sure,
answer.
so that's
I'm gonna,
what
wait.
you
I want
engage
to,
with.
Anna, but you can do this. But I have to repeat the question one more time because
Sure.
you'll never get an answer from this. Do we really think that there is a future where NATO countries? We already have nukes in Turkey. We already have the 3 countries up in the Baltics. Like, is Ukraine going to be? That's the domino that we invade Moscow through. Like, is that really a thing you think is going to happen? That Russia's going to be invaded by a NATO country? Why are you just saying random stuff? In 2000, I don't care. I'm just curious. Do you think that NATO will, or any NATO country will actually invade Russia? I don't want to quote or a news poster. Yeah. What is it?
In 2008, Russia said very clearly that the Ukraine and Georgia were red lines for them. Just like any country has to have its things that it's willing to tolerate and not willing to tolerate, like for the United States, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq or whatever. There have to be things that they will say are, tolerable or intolerable. And
sure,
Ukrainian,
but do you think NATO will invade Russia?
Is intolerable.
But do you think NATO will invade Russia?
Do I think?
I'm asking.
Do I think NATO will invade Russia?
Yes, it's a yes or no question. We're asking for the 6th time.
The answer is obviously no. Like, we literally have, we've got a phone set up between Washington and the
Why are they
Kremlin.
expanding all the way up to Russia's borders? Why are they doing?
Because when you're not, because for the
why are
go
they
Adam,
ripping
go
up
Adam.
arms?
Okay, wait.
Why would they do that? Why would they put dual-use missiles in Romania and Poland? Why are they doing the largest military exercises since the Cold War all throughout Eastern Europe, including on Russia's borders?
I would love to answer that.
Why are they sanctioning Russia? Why are they saying that they're happy with Ukrainians?
Okay. Please, both. Thank you, both of you.
Okay.
Stop for a second. Okay.
Adam is.
Wait. Okay.
I love answering things.
Okay.
And
so
it's not like America doesn't launch aggressive.
Is my mic not on? Can nobody hear me? Okay. Sorry.
Prepare yourself for that possibility.
Okay. Wait. Is my mic actually not working? I can't tell if it is or not.
It's working. I'm just playing whack-a-mole.
We can hear you.
Okay, it is working. I can tell. Okay, so you guys were talking over each other, so I and nobody heard anything. Okay, so this is what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna have AdamSomething ask the question, and I'm gonna have Connor respond, and neither of you talk over the other. Adam, if you think he's not answering the question, you can just repeat it right after he finishes answering. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, Adam, what is the question?
I was about to actually answer the question. Connor asked the question.
Oh, it was Connor who asked the question. Okay, Connor, then can you ask the question?
But short, in the short form. He's muted.
Okay.
Oh shit. Okay.
So why does NATO expand or something like that? That was the question.
Yeah, why are they ripping up arms treaties? Why are they constantly doing massive drills in Russia's near abroad? Why did they unilaterally, in violation of international law, attack Kosovo? And why are they promising Georgia and Ukraine NATO membership when they know that could cause a war because the Russians have said that it would be a direct threat to their security and they would be forced to decide whether to intervene, particularly in Ukraine. Ukraine has been invaded by Western powers several times, including by the Nazis. So why is the because they were promised that NATO wouldn't expand. So why would you have to explain why they would break that promise?
Okay, so your original question was that why does NATO keep expanding around Russia and like of course. So if you look at this one from a Realpolitik perspective, of course, like why does Russia invade all these other neighboring countries around it, right? There's not much peace, it seems, in the former imperial sphere, and so it makes perfect sense that countries would democratically vote to join a defensive alliance against while neighboring an aggressive imperialist power such as Russia. And dude, like there's Georgia, there's Transnistria, there's Ukraine, like shit gets fucked up around Russia. Like everyone can see, people, I would say people with the IQ of a room temperature can see this, right? So if you're a voter and if you're like, should I join NATO or not? Like, so we have this neighbor, Russia, he keeps like fucking invading its former subjects and try to subjugate them again. I don't know. Should we join NATO? I guess we kind of should. Like that's the response, right? That's why people voted in all these countries to join NATO. And if Russia perceives this as a threat, by the way, that's Russia's problem.
I also want to add on to Adam.
Yes,
I want to add on real quick to Adam too, because this question gets floated a lot. This idea that like, well, what if Russia were to start bases around Mexico? Or what if Russia were to create bases inside Canada or Cuba and they were to start staging missiles there? That would be pretty egregious, I admit. What if the United States were to try to recognize like independent regions in Mexico or Canada and send fucking troops into those countries to begin civil wars in those countries with Mexico or Canada? Like the United States would have to take like pretty unprecedented aggression against its neighbors, at least in the past 30 years, in order to like even begin to have a conversation about what would it look like if another country were to like come in and like set up shop in some of these countries. Because the United States behavior towards the countries that neighbor it are nowhere near comparable to Russia behavior against countries like Moldova or countries like Georgia or countries like Ukraine.
And the reality is on that, Destiny, is that the United States doesn't do it with its neighbors. It's doing it halfway around the world in Russia's backyard. Things like that, like the war in Syria, like that's
not true. What U.S. troops were in Syria?
Of two democratically elected
U.S.
governments
troops were in Syria.
Wait, you said what U.S. troops are in Syria?
The U.S. didn't have ground forces in Syria.
There was a small contingent of U.S. troops there. However,
no, it's roughly a third of the country. The country is under sanctions. Israel bombs it virtually every week.
That's not troops. No. To be comparable to what Russia is doing, Russia has like their entire military moving into breakaway states on Ukraine.
They have a base. They have a base on the Mediterranean there. And the Americans going back, they did not do that for years. It wasn't until Damascus was threatened by terrorist groups that were aligned with Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. That's what happened, and it's because, and you can read about it in the New York Times if you want, it was called Operation Timber Sycamore. And the CIA and its allies were arming terrorist groups in an attempt to overthrow the government of Damascus.
Sure, we can talk about arming terrorist groups, and the United States almost certainly funneled weapons into
Syria. No, but then they went into the country and carpet-bombed cities. And now they occupy a third of the country, and it's still under
The United
sanctions.
States occupies a third of Syria right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Roughly a third. Who do you think controls the oil in Syria?
I don't know today. I know it was ISIS for a while, and I know there's a fight. I'm pretty sure Turkey
extended forces and their Kurdish allies.
The Kurds that Trump threw under the bus, right? That Trump broke off all relationships with, right? After denying.
Okay, I'm legitimately lost because I don't think you can tell a lie this big. Wait, the U.S. doesn't currently occupy 1/3 of Syria, do we? Did I miss some shit?
And yes, they're acting aggressively in Syria.
Dude, Russia invaded fucking Syria to prop up Assad right before he would fall. And then carpet bombed. Yeah, because Assad is a useful idiot, is a dictator who will then be turned pro-Putin. Actually, Syria under Assad, the dictatorship had a long history of being pro-Russian.
What would the U.S. do if Saudi Arabia was attacked like that?
I don't fucking care. We're talking about, in this case, I guess.
And that's the problem, Adam. That's exactly the problem.
You do know.
Saying that
they're helping them commit genocide in Yemen because Riyadh doesn't like the Houthis.
We're not
saying that I don't effing care about what. Saying what I don't effing care about what the United States would do
in the context of these
exactly comparable situations is exactly the problem. We're talking about having
you're right.
empathy for your enemies. And
I should have clarified, in this specific debate, I don't care about that because that's not what we're talking about, right?
Why not?
Because this is
wait a minute. So the U.S. can kill hundreds of thousands of people in Yemen.
Because this is a whataboutism is what you're doing. I don't give
No, it's not whataboutism. It's not whataboutism.
Wait, hold on. Also, I want to clarify. Hold on.
Yes,
we can be critical of the actions of plenty of nations.
You brought up Russia's intervention in Syria, I believe, relatively early in this conversation.
It is okay to criticize even the actions of the United States, okay? But to try to say that the actions of the United States are the same as Russia here is just not true.
Okay, no. I'm serious. The American government has been responsible for much more killing.
It's not about. Hold on.
My lifetime than Russia has.
Okay. So you're yelling over each other. We're gonna have Destiny say what he's gonna say.
You really want to compare the death toll?
Connor.
Okay, yeah, we're not talking about death tolls. This is like a 2-year-old's way of
Why
talking
not?
about. I'll explain if you let me finish my sentence, okay? Death tolls is not what we talk about when we're trying to figure out, like, is a...
How about aggressive wars?
Okay. How about the concept of invading a country and trying to break away
Iraq,
territory?
Or Afghanistan, or Syria,
so tell me, so what parts of, like,
Libya?
Iraq and Afghanistan or Syria or Libya has the United States broken off and have, like, and is
No,
trying
they
to incorporate in our country?
they just killed...
Exactly. So you said no because these are fundamentally... So these are fundamentally... These are fundamentally...
part of a regime
I have to
change.
finish.
Okay, so this is what we're gonna do because it happens every single time.
It's so different. You can kill as many people as you want.
That's exactly what I said.
This is what we're gonna do.
That's exactly what I said.
Both of you are just yelling over each other, and nobody
and
can
now
hear
I'm muted.
anything.
Wait, look at Kosa.
And so, okay, so both of you are just yelling, and nobody can hear anything. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Destiny say what he wants to say, and then we're going to have Connor say what he wants to say in response to that, okay? And neither of you are going to say anything while the other person is talking, okay? Destiny, you go first.
Okay, hopefully I can finish my statement. Okay, if you are on this panel expecting either me or Adam to defend the U.S. invasion of Iraq or the U.S. occupation of Afghanistan for 7,000 years, I don't think either of us are going to do that. I think that there is plenty of criticism fairly there to go around for the United States government and for our foreign policy. However, to try to say that the United States made this mistake, therefore Russia ought to be allowed to do the same thing, or that Russia's action... Are you fucking serious?
Connor.
Jesus
No, I'm
fucking
not
Christ!
justifying what Russia's
Holy
doing.
shit!
I'm
Can I
saying
finish
that-
my statement? I can't. I'm not going to be able to finish. Okay. What Russia is doing is unique in that Russia is sending their armed forces to another country in order to, one, seize territory, like they did with the Crimean Peninsula, to annex it and take it as their own, and then two, to break off parts of the country so that they can be independent states that they have a permanent peacekeeping presence in, like they did with Abkhazia and South Odessa and Georgia, like they did with Transnistria and Moldova. These are not things that the United States does. Now, if you want to be critical of U.S. involvement in places like in Iraq and Afghanistan, that's fine. I'm pretty sure every single person in this call would share with your criticisms. But to say that, one, it's the same as what Russia's doing is false, and two, to use it to justify Russia's aggression is ignorant. That's my point.
Well, I'm not using it to justify aggression. I'm saying that there is a pattern here where there are responses. Both Russia and the United States are governments that are led by men who are willing to wage wars and do things that none of us would do. So knowing that, and knowing that they are the two largest nuclear superpowers, why would you support a policy that makes it much more likely that they'll come to fight each other? Which is actually what's happening right now. I mean, look. You don't have to defend what the Russians are doing, but they're talking about defending themselves with nuclear weapons. NATO talks, the U.S. talks constantly about how they're defending Ukraine, helping them kill Russians. You're talking about Kosovo. That was changing borders.
So real quick to jump in on Destiny's point, Connor, just real quick here to jump in on Destiny's point, I'd like to jump in here for half a second, is that he says that, America, the United States, the West, doesn't do things like Russia does. They don't break away pieces of countries. They full-fledged invade, annihilate other people's armies, overthrow their regimes, and occupy them for 20 years. They don't annex them to America, sure. They set up puppet democracies that have absolutely no will to rule outside of their Western puppet masters. So to say that Russia is way worse in this context than the West, there's just no leg to stand on. But again, like Connor said, we're not defending Russia's actions in Ukraine. What we're saying is take a look in the mirror and see that bombing country after country, overthrowing country after country, talking about regime change in the former Soviet countries, and actually talking about regime change in Moscow, funding non-government organizations that are focused on doing things like that, is behavior that antagonizes and causes escalation and conflicts like what we see in the Ukraine. And to not be able to see that is to not be able to see past the end of your own nose.
With this, you're kind of actually stripping away agency from Russians and Putin, because what you're implying here is that, you know, what the West does, you know, Russia is like a cornered animal with no sort of any thinking skills. They're just gonna instinctively respond to what the West does. So the onus is completely on the West, and Russia's behavior and Putin's behavior will depend entirely on what the West does. This is incorrect. You brought up I think Connor brought up the nuclear weapons point. Currently, look, Russia is currently the first one to threaten nukes and the last one. NATO and Biden's response has unilaterally been, dude, look, just restraint. It's very irresponsible. Don't say that. No. And then Putin's like, hey, by the way, we have this brand new ICBM. We just tested it. Hey, by the way, you know, the Western support to Ukraine threatens nuclear war. You know, if you don't want nuclear war, then perhaps you should, perhaps Vladimir Putin should stop threatening with fucking nukes, right? It's the same thing with war in Europe and peace, right? If you don't want war, if you want peace, well then, we can talk, you know, for 5 hours about what the West could do, or Russia could just pull out of fucking Ukraine, right? So the reason why Russians are dying in Ukraine is because Russians are in fucking Ukraine, right? Like, this is just, I feel like we're talking talking past each other in this a bit, but you know.
Adam, I'll respond to your point right now. The whole idea that my position or our position, my position in particular, our position in general, is denying Russians some kind of agency is ridiculous on its face. Why? Because if we were talking to a Russian audience, if I was talking to a Russian audience, I would be saying, look, this war is completely unjustified. Here's the reasons, and here's what we should have been doing otherwise. What I actually already have done on my YouTube channel, and you know, so far so good. The FSB hasn't showed up for me. That's wonderful. But when I'm talking to an American audience, what we're looking at is what is the West's policies that are responsible or that have led to this. Not that we're denying agency in Russia. Russia should not have invaded Ukraine. That's how we started this debate. Shouldn't have done it. But if we can't see that unilaterally getting out of nuclear non-proliferation treaties, unilaterally extending the borders of our military influence in Eastern Europe and in former Soviet countries, that these kinds of actions aren't antagonistic to the local power, which is Russia in that neighborhood, is absurd.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So one point at a time. So a major recurring point that I see here is that NATO sort of expanding around Russia is somehow a threat to Russia. This is not true. What goes on inside those sovereign countries' borders is those sovereign countries' business. Just like how when Russia brings its military next to Ukraine's borders and just like has them there for months, according to Sergei Lavrov, it is Russia's business what Russia is allowed to do inside Russian borders. Same thing. NATO countries, like prospective NATO member states, even it is completely their business what they can and can't do within their borders. Implying otherwise would be a huge hypocrisy, unless your actual point here is to downplay Russia's wrongdoings and sort of overplay the West. So.
What countries do inside of their own borders, I agree with you, is largely up to those countries. However,
it's completely up to those
countries. Externalities. No, not completely. There are externalities. Just like, for instance, Defender 2021 and the large-scale NATO exercises inside of Ukraine that look like buildup, and to which Russia responds with buildup on Ukrainian borders.
Okay, so do you think there is a risk?
There's always one question, Adam, real quick.
Go ahead.
Putting missiles in Cuba is putting missiles in Cuba in the 60s, is that just, everything, it's just people inside their own borders doing stuff? Like, no, of course not. Things that you do inside of your own country or inside of the countries of your allies have externalities. And to not admit that is to have an autistic vision of the world.
When we talk about nukes,
when the Schultz government took power in Germany, there was a question about whether or not the coalition.
Okay, so that was a question directed towards AdamSomething. So I want AdamSomething to respond, right? Because it was directed towards Adam. And
sure. So if we talk about nukes, it's absolutely a different question. I agree with you. However, putting troops within a country's border, so we're not talking about nuclear forces, just regular troops. That is, of course, a different kind of animal, right? So, if a country decides to once again join NATO, I mean, they're free to do so. And even if NATO allies decide to have a military exercise inside Ukrainian borders, I mean, that's also fine. And so in your world, then based on what you said, you must believe that Russia had seriously thought that there was a realistic risk of NATO invading Russia, right? If they were really so afraid of the exercises within Ukraine, the NATO-led exercises, which then triggered their force buildup. Like if Vladimir Putin thought that NATO. If you thought that there was no chance of NATO invading Russia, then they wouldn't use this as a justification for Russia's troop buildup on the border. If you're following me. So
I'd like to respond real quick to Adam, and then I'll kick it over. And then I'll kick it over to Connor and Destiny, and I'll shut up because I know I'm taking a little bit too much airtime here. Okay. But here's the deal: Russia. I do not believe that Russia legitimately believes that NATO in its current construction will invade Russia. That's absurd on its face. No Russian politician actually thinks that. The reality is that Russia understands what unstable governments happen. When the Soviet Union collapsed, it immediately made small countries large nuclear powers, like Ukraine and Kazakhstan, for instance. And there was an entire period of time in the early 90s, especially, when we were like, are we going to have nuclear war between small countries because they've been armed by the militaristic expansion of the Soviet Union? Russia looks at that and says, upheavals in Europe, problems in Europe, if there's military bases all along the Russian border, who knows what happens around the future? So the idea of geopolitics, of looking into the future, is saying not what would be done exactly today under the current construction of things, but what could be done with these tools in the near the near future, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road. And that is something that they are responsible to doing, just like putting missiles in Cuba, just like, for instance, the buildup of the German army on the Polish border. All of these things are legitimate security concerns. And again, not to see that is the prerogative, is the the great prerogative of the West, which, and especially of America, which sits atop of the geopolitical order at the moment. To not take into consideration the legitimate security concerns of lesser powers is our prerogative, and we do so at our peril.
Sure, and that's why Ukraine relinquished its nuclear weapons in exchange for its territorial integrity guaranteed by Russia, and we see what that amounted to. So
okay, we're gonna throw it over to Connor, and then probably
absolutely, just like Libya and the United States.
Libya and the United States are not NATO or Russia. Has there ever been a history where
Destiny?
Oh,
sorry,
got muted again.
Do it over to Connor.
Jesus,
gotta cuck you. Sorry, Connor.
Okay, the U.S. Routinely, particularly under Trump, and it continued under Biden, fly strategic bombers within less than 13 miles of the Russian coast in the Black and Baltic Sea. They have placed frigates and other warships in the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea that carry nuclear weapons. Okay. When the Schultz government came to power before the war started, there was a question about whether or not the new coalition would be willing to continue to host American nuclear weapons. And Stoltenberg said that if they decided not to, he would deploy them further east to Eastern Europe countries that are in NATO. So when you say nuclear war is unthinkable, the Americans or the British or the French would see it very differently if somebody else was doing these same things to them. And we know that because of the history of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And and also, again, if you're talking about Ukraine, there, again, overthrowing governments is also illegal. And if you're talking about, again, that's what I don't understand. So if the Americans do that, and then and also, of course, when you say that Ukraine, the idea that Ukraine, people say Ukraine won't join NATO. Why should the Russians believe that? If they perceive a security threat here, and let's say hypothetically Ukraine did eventually join NATO, and they were attacked, what would they be able to do? It's if the shoe was on the other foot, I think you would see things quite differently. And again, not defending Russia, but why do this? If there is a nuclear war, if Putin's an absolute madman, then why provoke him and the Russian people like this? If a nuclear war happens, are you just, even though we agree that that would be horrible, are you going to rest assured that you were correct, that Moscow is run by an evil right-wing dictator? If that's the case, then why provoke them like this?
Right, yes.
Yeah, but then why? Okay, why do this? And you could also argue that people like George W. Bush is far right. I can
answer this very quickly.
Donald Trump.
Sure, I can answer this very quickly. So what you're advocating for here is appeasement, right? So
no, not appeasement. I'm saying
yes, it is.
Why?
Let me answer, please. I'll explain. I swear. So, following your logic, Putin. If we are afraid that Putin is a madman who might press the red button, right? It's unlikely. In fact, I don't think it will ever happen. But still, then why are we getting involved in this? Why are we trying to stop Putin? Otherwise he'll just press the button, and then we can rest assured, dying in like nuclear fallout, that we were correct about our convictions. So why try to stop Putin and risk nuclear war, and why try to confront Putin as he tries to sort of basically grind Ukraine into nothing, right? Okay, so then what? So then we have established that nuclear threats are an instant sort of BTFO button for the West, right? As far as Putin is concerned. So then, what if after Ukraine, Putin shows up at the in like Estonia, the Baltics basically, and says, hey, by the way, just give me back these countries, so restore my former sphere of influence. Otherwise, red button, guys. I'm about to press it. So, if following your logic, this just leads to an endless cycle of appeasement where we back out, because we don't want to risk nuclear war over, over Ukraine, over the Baltics. Look how tiny those countries are. Are you fucking kidding me? Like nuclear war over fucking Estonia? Just let Putin have it. So this is the logical consequence of what you're advocating for. But this is you didn't say that, but this is the logical consequence of what you're advocating for.
I also think it's important.
I don't think that's the case. I think it's being realistic and suggesting that it's not. Well, have they? Don't you think that this is unnecessarily provocative? Why do that? Why carry out these?
Everybody does military exercises. Russia, China, North Korea.
The Russians do not do the equivalent to the Americans.
They literally did. The United Kingdom in February was literally scrambling jets as fucking Russia is like flying like military bombers and shit like off of the coast of fucking Scotland. Like this absolutely happened.
Just 2 days ago. Just 2 days ago, Russian jets violated Swedish airspace. So
yeah, sure. And Russian jets have violated Turkish airspace. They got shot down when they were on their way to Syria. Like China does military exercises. North Korea does.
By another 800 miles. It poses a nuclear threat. They've already said that they're going to deploy.
We should probably let Destiny finish. He was waiting very long to say his point.
People do military exexercises all the time, okay? But probably so that they don't end up in a situation like Russia
where
they
do
find
the Americans what we're doing.
I specifically said we should let Destiny finish.
So that their military doesn't end up completely antiquated and unable to do anything like what happened when Russia attempted to invade Ukraine and has failed miserably to make the kind of progress that they wanted to. People do military exercises all the time. We can't say that we can't do military exercises because if we do, we might provoke one country to invade another. What you're talking about is absolutely appeasement. Like, I'll ask this question a million times and I'll never get a straight answer. Do we ever see a situation where NATO is invading Russia? Or retrospectively, has there ever been a situation ever where NATO troops have fired on Russian troops? Like, this doesn't happen. You can't fabricate this hypothetical security concern and then use that as a foundation for invading a country because you think that there might be some kind of construction of NATO in the future that might possibly represent a threat to Russia that is unique with Ukraine joining NATO, even though we've already got the Baltics, even though we've already got Turkey. Like, it just doesn't make sense. We're on so many levels of abstraction here to invade the very real occupation of a country that it totally betrays Ukraine's right to have its own sovereignty and its own security interests.
Okay. So again, the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy threatened to essentially burn the world down. Now, again, with NATO, they are backing forces in Ukraine, whether you think it's right or not, that where Russian troops are dying. And yes, Ukrainians are dying too. So, I mean, why would you're threatening, at what point does it become not wise to push this issue so much with a power that has 6,000 nuclear weapons and feels encircled and threatened, and willing to launch this kind of invasion when they knew the consequences of what would happen? Why do that? And why do the Americans seem to want to see, why do certain NATO member states, this has come out in Washington Post and elsewhere, why do they want the war to continue and not end too soon?
Okay, so wait, Connor. So let me get it straight. Russia, the biggest single nuclear power on the planet, feels threatened and unsafe and cornered.
Yeah. They've been encircled with NATO countries and military equipment and bases and bombers and missiles and troops.
So
and,
I like it. That when this comes up, then like Russia's nuclear arsenal suddenly doesn't matter at all, right? Otherwise, but when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to us protecting Ukraine, then it's like, oh wait, dude, like Russia has nukes. Don't you know that Russia has nukes? It means nuclear weapons. Those are nukes. But when it comes to like, oh, Russia is feeling threatened, it's cornered, like once again stripping Russia of its agency.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they have the agency.
Suddenly we fucking forget about the nukes. Then suddenly we forget about the nukes.
Huh? I haven't forgotten the nukes at all.
So then, can we just admit that no NATO country is ever invading Russia? It's not going to happen.
Yes, please.
No, there's no reason to believe that.
So if they were, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, mutually, if the powers. Look, if the regime in Washington was really concerned about mutually assured destruction, which I hope a lot of them still are, they would not have launched this war where they're trying to literally isolate, weaken, and cripple Russia in a proxy war.
We haven't launched a war. The U.S. didn't launch the war. Russia did.
Imagine if the country becomes destabilized and impoverished, and they do feel they are pushed into a corner, and they do feel like they have to defend themselves. They have made this clear that they will do that. So
defend themselves against what?
Against being attacked.
Well, who's attacking them?
Well, up until, I mean, again, you had...
Who's attacking them?
No one's attacking Russia. That's the whole point.
Who's attacking Russia? Who's attacking Russia, Connor? Who's attacking Russia?
Okay, imagine if when the Americans invaded Iraq...
No, who's attacking Russia now? Don't give me Iraq. Don't give me Afghanistan. Who's invading Russia now? Who's
going to attack Russia? We don't even attack Russian troops when they're not in Russia. Like, what?
Yeah, there's
to your point, they're not invading Russia because of mutually assured destruction, but they have started a conflict now where look, Putin invaded Ukraine. No one's questioning that. But this came after 30 years of NATO expansion, 8 years after the government in Ukraine was overthrown and then turned into a NATO outpost. They are acting to prevent Ukraine from being bought into NATO and from a threat, what they view as a threat to their security, rightly or wrongly. I think you could make the argument that with the constant military exercises, look, how do you think the Russian people perceive all of this?
Wait. Okay, so why is Ukraine joining NATO a threat to Russia, the single biggest nuclear power on the planet?
Because Ukraine has been used as a way to invade Russia for centuries.
We can't. Hold on. We can't. When we speak about what the security in Europe, we have to be smart and we have to talk about it from 91 to today. You can't compare an invasion of Russia from 200 years ago to today. Well, my history is really bad, but I don't think we had nuclear weapons 200 years ago. The general way that armies function around the world was completely and totally different. Again, when you say, well, Russia was invaded through Ukraine in the past, that's true because of the geography. That's not going to happen today. And you haven't admitted as much, but I think any reasonable person would admit as much. If we wanted to invade Russia, we wouldn't be thinking like, well, Jesus, like we don't have Ukraine as part of NATO. I guess we can't do it. Like,
they're in a proxy war.
Destiny is completely right. Destiny is absolutely correct when he says
can't wait for
that
this
we need to take into consideration the history from 1991 to today. What happened in the 90s in the Russian foreign policy. The United States supported the Chechen breakaway rebels who did massive incursions into Russia, took hundreds of people hostages on 4 different occasions, killed hundreds of Russian citizens, and we're like, you know what? We're the good guys. Don't worry. It's all good. We can have outposts on your borders and nothing will go wrong. The people that we decide to support invade your country, kill your children, like in Beslan, and you know what? It's fine. Don't worry. We're the good guys. Everything is fine.
My understanding is that Chechen, there was never any foreign U.S. support for any of that, the Civil War stuff that was going on in Russia. Is that a thing? Like,
yes.
There might have been something like tacit, indirect, but not.
Is it going to be like they met
support.
with a leader and talked, or were there actual there were no U.S. troops there? Were there actual arms or anything transferred, or was this just
there was CIA backing and Saudi Arabia's backing.
Okay. The CIA.
By the way, but hey guys,
that's admitted in Stratford. The Saudi Arabian
wait, just one sec.
Wait. The question was asked what it was. Then he said CIA. Then there was objection. I think he should be able to clarify what he meant by CIA.
He did clarify.
Connor?
There was nothing. That's what he meant to say.
Yeah, I mean,
Connor, do you want to clarify what you meant by the CIA?
There was a congressional task force launch that indicated and there have been various intelligence sources that have said that was the case. And the Americans were also supporting the Russians fighting the Chechens at the time. It's a very sordid history, but there's several sources if you want to check it out.
I wonder why the Chechens were kind of upset at Russians though.
Imagine defending Russia in that conflict. But
Obama.
No, I'm not defending them. I'm saying this was provocative.
Yeah, okay, so but dude, like Chechens.
Okay, we had one terror attack on 9/11 in the United States that then launched a 20-year war in Afghanistan where we churned that country over again and again and again.
That's bad. Yes.
Imagine if Mexico, with the support of Russia, had invaded Texas and taken hundreds of people hostages on 4 different occasions over the course of 10 years.
This is not analogous.
Which hundreds and hundreds of people had died. It would be analogous, and it is a good counterfactual to think about. This is what we're trying to say, Adam.
Okay,
and Destiny, is that if you do not try to walk a mile in the other guy's shoes, you are destined to repeat the errors of history.
Okay, so this is not analogous because, okay, can you answer me this question, please? How come Chechnya was inside like Russian/Soviet borders? How come they ended up there?
Are we going back before 91? Are we going back before 91 and talking about the Soviet history and the imperialist Russian history? Are we going back to Soviet era, Adam, and talking about that, or are we talking about from 31? Because if we're going back to the Soviet era, Adam, if we're going back to the Soviet era, remember that the United Kingdom, Japan, and America invaded Russia. There was a U.S.
No. Okay, wait.
Which is analogous to.
Okay, wait. Okay, Kaz, don't mute Justus. I was telling Adam to quiet down because Adam asked the question. I want Justus to be able to finish responding. Yeah.
Did my response get mutilated?
Yeah, accidentally. So can you? All
right. So one more time. If we're going back to the Soviet era history here, and we're not restraining ourselves to 1991 and from then on, let's talk about that. The United Kingdom, Japan, and America invade post-Tsarist Russia, and the United States has a military bases as deep into Russia as Central Siberia, Krasnoyarsk, which is analogous to Russia having had military bases in the 20th century in Denver. Like, this is insanity. We don't want to go down this road.
Dude, yes, I don't think you want to go down this road because, like, for example, in the Second World War, the U.S. gave massive support to the Soviets against the Nazis. So so there isn't such a clear antagonism between Soviet Russia and America, like the way you think. But anyway, the reason why I asked a question about Chechnya, the reason why Chechens were kind of uppity at Russians is because, of course, Chechens are also victims of Russian imperialism, and of course we have all seen what happened to the Chechens. Of course, Grozny was fucking leveled, just like Mariupol, just like essentially razed to the ground. Everyone's fucking murdered there. Of course, the Chechen rebels did have support internationally early on in the conflict, but as their methods got more brutal and brutal, that international support evaporated over time. But otherwise, this doesn't, of course, excuse Russia's sort of essentially genociding of the Chechen peoples, and then appointing fucking Kadyrov as Emperor Supreme of modern-day Chechnya. So, this is what is also the result of Russian imperial action, which has a very long and very rich history. They've always been doing this. They've been doing this for fucking hundreds of years. And the same thing with Ukraine, same thing with Georgia, same thing with the Chechens back then, same thing with the Baltics. It's just this continuation of this one big Russian imperial project. It's very aggressive. It's ethno-nationalist, by the way. The reason why all these satellite states have Russian minorities is because they were fucking forcibly moved in there, settled in there, and the local population was essentially culturally genocided. That's why Belarusia is at this point is basically 99% Russian. There used to be a Belarusian language. There used to be Belarusian culture. It has been systemically eradicated by Soviets.
That's why there's so many ethnic Russians in eastern Ukraine as well. Yeah, following the Holodomor, hundreds of thousands of Russians moving in. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So as bad as the US is,
if we're going to go back to the 1800s and talk about Russian imperialism, let's go back to the 1800s and talk about Western imperialism. I don't think that is very productive for this conversation, but I am glad that you brought up the Western support for the Soviet Union against the fascists in World War II, which of course is an undeniable historical fact, which makes it even more ironic and strange. Which makes it even more ironic and strange that the United States and the West is now supporting the Ukrainian government, who has serious Nazi sympathizers and serious fascist problems in its coalition that is governing coalition right now. Not saying that's a justification for war, but it is ironic.
Justus, dude, you do not want to get into this, but okay, fine. So Russia is Ukraine is currently headed by, of course, a Jewish president, a Russian native speaker, as we all know. The Ukrainian Jewish community is supporting him and is anti-Russian at this point. Of course, the Ukrainian far right won one seat out of 450 in the Ukrainian parliament. Also, if we really want to talk about sort of Nazi influences, of course, the Wagner group and all other paramilitaries inside Russia are virulent fucking far-righters and Nazis. Also, back during the day, even during the heroic days of the Great Patriotic War, as Russians call it, the Second World War. People back in the day were being demoted or fired from the government because of being too Jewish. That was a time when the Russian government was trying to rub up to Hitler's Germany. And I have the quote here because I knew this would come up. Let's see. When Stalin replaced Litvinov with Molotov because the former was too Jewish. And I quote, "The Soviet government intended to improve its relations with Hitler and, if possible, sign a pact with Nazi Germany. As a Jew and an avowed opponent of such policy, Litvinov stood in the way. And so Stalin got rid of him." So the Soviet Union and also today's Russia has a really rich history of cooperating with Nazis, whereas Ukraine seems to be has a huge Jewish population and seems to be the least anti-Semitic country in Europe based on statistics. So you can gesture at the far righters in Ukraine. This has been going on since fucking 2014, but it doesn't make it any more true than it is. Which is to say, it's not.
Adam, I knowing that some of your own influences that you claim as influences on you, like Sean or Triple Arrow, which I'm glad for that. You should not make the argument that Ukraine has a Jewish president, therefore they can't be Nazis. It's ridiculous because having followed the channels that I just noted, that one of the greatest one of the key arguments of Holocaust deniers is that, there were Jewish people serving in the Nazi army. There was entire Jewish battalions in the Nazi army.
Yes,
so
you're correct.
Correct. A Holocaust. I
agree.
Seriously infantile argument to make.
And I agree with you. And I agree with you that because, of course, if I only base my argument on like, oh, hey, look, Ukraine can be far right. Look, Zelensky is Jewish. That would be like me saying, oh, look, there's no racism in America. Obama is black. Yeah. However, if I didn't just notice how I didn't just base my argument on like, hey, look, Jewish president, BTFO, got him. No, there's a whole range of other factors that I brought out. Zelensky being a Russian native speaker, Jewish president is just being one of them, right? I don't think you want to bring this up that much because Sergei Lavrov just came out and said that even though Zelensky is Jewish, Hitler also had some Jew in him, so that's why Zelensky's a Nazi or something to that effect. So careful with what you say because the chances are like Russian propaganda has already tried to bullshit its way into our zeitgeist with it. So
also piggyback on Adam's thing here. When we talk about like there being like a ton of far right presence in Ukraine, this is literally the most concealed far right presence of any country in the entire world, right? Ukraine was the only country in the world besides Israel to have a Jewish head of state and Jewish prime minister at the same time. The far right party, the Svoboda one that Adam mentions, they have one seat in parliament. They have like 15,000 members across like a 40+ million population country. And if you really want to make claims like this, there is so much far right fascist stuff that exists within Russian borders in a country that's like authoritarianly controlled that has to run like at the behest of Putin. When you talk about like the Wagner group, nobody seems to bring that up. When you talk about the Russian imperial movement that literally sponsors foreign terrorists that have done attacks in other countries like Sweden, the idea that if you really truly care about some fascist or far right element existing, and then you've got to go to like Ukraine and get a fucking magnifying glass out to find out like which one of like 900 people might have like an SS tattoo on them and say, look, you've got a huge problem in Ukraine, when every single military in the world probably has like some far right people in it. I think it overplays like any fascist element that exists in Ukraine, and I think it underplays dramatically any fascist or far right element that exists in Russia.
It just uses a simple small screen to
response to Adam and Destiny real quick here. First of all, claiming that Zelensky is Jewish and talking about the Jewish influence here is again, it's smoke and mirrors. And of course, I'm not saying that that's the only thing that's the only thing you said. You also said, well, the Soviet Union were also racist, and the current Russian also have fascist elements. And to that, I would say Russia fought a devastating war against fascism, and they learned their lesson. And they've been trying very systematically ever since then to not go back to not have anything to do with fascist ideologies in their country. Are there fascists in Russia? Are there fascist groups? Yes. To compare them to the problems that we have with fascist groups in Ukraine is absurd. Why did Minsk II not get implemented? Zelensky goes to the DNR and the LNR front lines and says, guys, to his Azov Brigade and the different fascist militias that are actually the spearhead of that fight, and says, we need to implement Minsk II. We agreed to it. It's a good thing. Good for Zelensky. He's doing the right thing. And his fascist war dogs said, basically, pound dirt. We are going to retake these territories. We're going to push the Russians out. We're going to reassert our influence over this. And Kiev has nothing to say to us about that. If you can show me a far-right fascist military group in Russia that has thousands of members and is fostering an ongoing hot war in its borderlands, I'll agree with you. Otherwise,
Wagner Group is in Ukraine.
Also,
by the way,
and then also real quick, when we talk about like the fascism between Russia and Ukraine isn't comparable, I do agree with that. Russia undeniably operates like as a fascist country. I don't see Ukraine doing it. Like when you're literally making the arguments that there is an ethnic people that exists in another country, so I need to go into that country to defend them violently and break away states, that is pretty fascist. You have your authoritarianism, you've got your ultranationalism, and you're using it with ethnic like roots. Like I don't know how much more fascist you could possibly get. And everybody always cites like the Minsk agreements in terms of like the they didn't work, and different sides get blamed on it. I have never seen anybody credibly talk about these agreements being implemented and actually working appropriately. Like, the fighting constantly raged on. Nobody had any idea. Like, they argued both sides about what was going to happen with the Donetsk International Airport. The DPR themselves literally said that, like, you know what, fuck that. We're still going to fight here. You know, you guys can do the rest of the stuff. Ukraine wasn't happy, obviously, with the outcome of that. The idea that there was like one side that was consistently breaking these agreements is just not true. Like, these were a shit show from the start to the end. The second accords had the same problem with the first, and I don't think you can point to like the collapse of these agreements as just like Zelensky being war hungry over what was going on.
Zelensky wasn't in power back then.
I'm pointing to the collapse of the Minsk II agreements, not as Zelensky being war hungry. He wasn't, but of him not having control over his far right militias.
Wait, Minsk II was actually, I think Minsk II was broken by separatists launching an offensive on, I believe, Avdiivka in the Donetsk region. Anyway, feel free to look it up. What I wanted to actually harken back to, since we're almost out of time for the debate section, just to put a nice little ribbon on it. When we talk about like heroic Russian anti-fascism, everyone just feel free to Google the German Soviet Axis talks. This is more of that Realpolitik for us. When Soviets tried to ally with the Nazis and then carve off sphere of influence around the world, which didn't happen only because Hitler was too greedy in the end, or either Stalin, one of the two. But anyway, heroic Russian anti-fascism has been funny enough, a far-right nationalist myth in Russia used to drum up nationalistic fervor. Otherwise, it's complete bullshit. The Russian military was not as great as they say. Without substantial U.S. support, it wouldn't have won the Second World War that easily, at least. And also, in the beginning, it tried to ally with the Nazis pretty overtly. So.
Russia paid the price of 27 million of its people for that mistake, and they have recognized that ever since then. So to bring up past errors that they paid for in blood, 27 million people.
Okay, well, I'm sorry to cut this off, but
how did he get the last word past the
completely out on the clock? So I just wanted to make sure that Kaz could gain hold of the Q&A section where people like to make questions and stuff, right? That's what we're going into now, Kaz?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Dylan. Really appreciate that. I want to let you know, guys, if you have a question for one of tonight's debaters, please go ahead and send it. Super chats will be going to 100% of them will be going to the charity for tonight's cause, which is Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome. So please go ahead and send super chats if you would like. If you would like what you heard from one of tonight's debaters, their links are in the description below. So like the stream if you like what you heard, share it if you want to spread it, and subscribe for more juicy debates in the future. And again, we ask that you keep it civil, attack the argument and not the person, as the insults will not be read. So we're going to go ahead and kick it into the open, the Q&A now. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the first question. And that comes from Ezekiel Bread, and he says, can you say Obama?
Obama.
You must hear from everybody.
Obama.
All right. Dylan, do you want me to go ahead and send you some of these questions too, so you can ask them as well?
Sure. If anybody in my chat wants to do super chats as well, that's fine. We can take all the money at the end of it, and I'll send it over.
I'm gonna send a question in the private chat here in the StreamYard, so you can go ahead and ask that question, and then after you're done with that, I'll send the next one.
This is from Ezekiel Bread. Why do people wear gloves? Because their hands are cold. Why did Russia invade Ukraine? Because their hands were cold. They lacked the heating resources, oil.
Actually, the reason is more demographics, really. Russia is in high demographic decline, and Putin realized that essentially this was his last chance of making any meaningful dent in Ukraine. Their conscription numbers are decreasing year by year, or I would say half year by half year, and or so I've read. So basically, this was his last chance, and apparently he fucked it up.
We lost Connor. Uh-oh.
Oh, okay.
No.
We still have super chats coming in, guys, so just bear with me for 1 second.
Do we get to respond? Cause normally,
what was the question?
We get to respond, so I was muted for trying to respond to that question.
Were you sorry?
Yep, no problem. Whatever the reasons for the invasion of the Ukraine might or might not be, oil and natural resources, as far as natural gas, is definitely not one of them. Russia has one of the largest reserves of oil and natural gas in the world outside of the Ukraine. Invading them does nothing for them in that sense.
Yes, I agree.
All right. I hope Connor comes back. The next question comes from who is this? Did you already read? Joe Schwartz is 199 says, "What's your favorite video game and why?"
Is this relevant to our debate? Who is the question for? Are we all supposed to answer? Or?
Whoever wants it, I guess.
Mine is for
I'll kick it over
Mars.
to the gamers.
Yeah.
I'll kick over to the gamers.
For now, mine is like surviving Mars. So,
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to just...
Pets, Cats 2, of course.
You know, I'm
or
gonna
the
do,
Untitled
Dylan,
Goose Game.
Dylan, I'm going to send you this Google Doc link. Can you click on that for me? And can you open that?
Sure.
All right, so I'm going to just go ahead because people are still sending in super chats and questions. And I'm going to have to keep fielding them. So I'm just going to keep doing that and let you just read them off as you go. And then when we get to a point where we can't go anymore, we'll stop. Hopefully Connor comes back, and I'll just read the next question that we are at until you get in there. From Marximus 1000 for 40 Czar, for AdamSomething. If the Putin regime collapsed, do you think that there is a desire to instate a lib democracy? If no, what might it look like?
That's a tough question. I honestly don't know what would come out of a Putin regime collapse. Might be civil war, might be some other clique, some other oligarchical clique taking over. I would say if the Putin regime does collapse, I would intuitively reason that it would be just another sort of Silovik, another oligarchical clan taking over power, which at that point will be perhaps more amicable towards the West, because all these people care about is money and power, and that's where the money comes from, the West.
Gotcha. Are you in there yet, Dylan?
Yep, sure. From Mr. Saxokit. He says, with quotation marks, "You see, in 2008, NPC music intensifies."
Wait, you see from 2008? Is that what it was?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you want to do the next one, or should I do the next one?
Go ahead. I'm just trying to
No
figure out
idea
where
what
we
they're
are.
talking about.
From, I think, Maximus or Czar, one of the two. Is there any analogy to be had between the policy of appeasement with Germany during World War II and the global community response to the Putin regime?
I mean, I would say that like this. I think it's very weird to say like Ukraine isn't allowed to join NATO because that will provoke Russia, when like there is no aggression towards Russia, there is no attacking towards Russia, and there's not any future. There's no plans for NATO to start bombing or attacking Russia. It feels like appeasement that Ukraine isn't allowed to make decisions about the future of their country and the future of their security because they have to be a slave to Russian interests.
Okay. I've got a bunch of super chats rolling on
Real
my
quick,
side now.
jump-
Oh, sure, yeah.
Jump in on that. The behavior of the West towards Russia in the 90s and the early 2000s has proved that the West generally has ill intent towards Russia and its interests. So to say that NATO expansion is just, oh, it's okay, it's fine, there's no world that's going to ever have a problem, is, again, like I will keep repeating in this debate, it's to look at the world solely through the side of the West and not to look at it as it looks from the Russian side.
And I'll keep asking, where is the NATO aggression towards Russia? And I'll continue to receive no response. Yeah.
Okay.
Where is the Soviet aggression towards the United States when you put missile bases in Cuba?
It's not about, first of all, different security situation. Also, it's not about Russian aggression towards the U.S. It's about Russian aggression towards its neighbors. I'm pretty sure that after Georgia, after Moldova, after Ukraine, if you were to go up and ask Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Poland, Hungary, like, hey, how do you guys feel in NATO? I'm pretty sure all of them are pretty excited about their membership. I'm pretty sure they're sitting pretty good right now. And ironically, even Finland and Sweden now, countries that priorly were, deciding, we don't want to aggress on Russia, maybe it is too much, are now actually starting to flip their opinions on whether or not they should. I think Finland might have actually drafted something up that might be like coming up for consideration in their parliament.
And both of them are about to join NATO in the coming months.
Mm-hmm.
This from Streaks321. What does Justus have to say about the fact that the majority of the Jewish community around the world has rallied behind Ukraine?
That was breaking up. Something about the Jewish community.
Yeah, they basically asked, what do you think about the international Jewish community largely rallying behind Ukraine?
I think the international Jewish community is under the same influences as the rest of the world, and just like the Jewish community rallies around the state of Israel, even regardless of their policies towards the Palestinians, the Jewish community around the world can be mistaken.
Okay. Do you want me to just keep going, Kaz?
Yeah. Take it away, man.
Okay. This is from Allie with $50. Thank you very much. Question. How can you say that the United States is occupying a third of Syria? That takes agency away from the Kurds, an autonomous group that takes part in their own geopolitical relations. The SDF recently signed a security accord with Bashar al-Assad.
Yeah, so this is something weird. I'm sorry, go ahead. If it was you.
That was Connor's point. I wouldn't be so bold as to say that the United States it occupies a third of Syria. That the fact that the United States did support the overthrow of the Assad regime, or the attempted overthrow of the Assad regime, that is undeniable.
I actually want to piggyback on that. It's actually really weird. Like the more you move in these like weird pro-Russian circles, the more I think Destiny made this point originally. Like the more you go to these like weird extreme positions, like in this case pro-Russian, the more these sort of smaller ethnicities and groups disappear, and it's all about the U.S. and it's all about Russia. And then these these smaller groups like the Kurds or Ukrainians have virtually zero agency. They're just playthings of the larger players.
I do want to say before you read the next question that Connor did warn us before the stream began that he had a hard out time at around 5 o'clock his time, which I think is coming up in about 15 minutes. So that's probably where he is now. So if anybody's wondering where he is, hopefully he is doing okay, and we wish him the best. But this is a charity stream, so we're going to go ahead and try to press on for the question. So go ahead, Dylan.
Darth Elsa, can you guys explain why peace-loving Russian troops are flying the hammer and sickle if it's just about Russia defending itself?
Oh, good question.
That is a good question. And the answer has to do with internal Russian propaganda and narrative setting on the entire Ukraine invasion. The Russians see the Ukraine invasion, as Putin laid out in his pre-invasion speech, as a not saving legacy is not the right word, is not the way to say it, but the Ukrainians being pro-fascist and the Russians being anti-fascist, and the great anti-fascist legacy of the Soviet Union, and that has cultural memorable significance. Again, I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's correct, I'm saying that's how they see it.
I do like to, just on something Adam said earlier, I think it is a bit ironic that, like, there haven't been very many true fascist empires in the history of the world, and Russia did try to align with one of them when it came to it, but
paid the price of 27 million dead.
Go ahead.
Okay. This is from Stan G. For Justus. According to his logic, how is it that Ukraine didn't learn from its 7 million World War II casualties, but Russia did?
The problem, the tragedy of the game, the game of great powers, the United States, the Western powers, and the Eastern-oriented powers like Russia and China. The great tragedy of that game is that small countries are lost in the shuffle. The Ukrainians have learned lessons, absolutely tragic lessons, from the World War II and pre-World War II eras, and those lessons are, who do you want to align with? The communists who instigate Holodomor, or the fascists, Germans who instigate, Auschwitz and Auschwitz, and the Holocaust. So that is part of the fraught history of Ukraine right now. And again, if I were to take Iron Man the side of the Ukrainians and the support of far-right militias and so forth and so on, I'd say, yeah, but it's a lot more complicated than just Nazis.
And I would actually go so far as to say, yeah, sure, I agree. And now NATO is an option, and that's why Ukraine wants to join NATO, and that's why all these other countries want to join NATO, because they've learned their lesson. They don't want Russian imperialism back, and that's why you see NATO expanding, quote unquote.
Okay. You said that insults are not allowed. What if they're just snarky comments? Is that okay or not okay?
I know which one you're talking about. I think that this one is technically okay, but okay. I would, if you think it's not actually, okay, then go ahead.
I have a separate one. Actually, it's a lot more tame, I assume. This is from Looks It Gordo. It has quotation marks. Could I be wrong about this topic? No, it's the international Jewish community who is wrong.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. This is from Ezekiel Bread. Oh God, is this war wearing on Putin? I can imagine him saying, "I am admittedly beset by tiredness." Very good, guys. Good job. Great job. Nobody else understands it. Thank you very much. Okay, next. This is from Look It's Gordo. Defending Russia in this invasion is just despicable. But America. Okay?
True.
Going on. I will say that I will really quick say that I'm not defending the invasion of Ukraine. Russia had legitimate security concerns in the expansion of NATO, and they should have pursued other peaceful means of making those legitimate concerns, heard on the international in the international community. The invasion of Ukraine is an
Actually, I'm so
invasion of Ukraine is an atrocity.
But America,
the antagonism of the West sets the stage.
I'm really curious.
For us in the West, to deny that is, again, unfortunate.
I'm really curious. Would you make the same statement about the United States and Afghanistan, that Afghanistan represented a legitimate security concern with their harboring of the Taliban and everything and the existence of them there after 9/11, or?
I would say that the United States had legitimate security concerns in Afghanistan, but that did not justify a full-fledged invasion of the country.
No, I'm just curious.
Okay, moving on. This is from Darth Elsa again. Does Justus not see the correlation of Russia threatening its neighbors and those neighbors wanting to join NATO?
There is an absolute correlation between those neighbors wanting to join NATO and the perceived threat of Russian aggression. But again, the perceived threat of Russian aggression increases with Western incursion into those regions. So it's a tit for tat.
Sure. Okay. Western incursion into those regions, as in countries democratically voting to align with themselves with the West. So anyway.
Okay.
As in the Crimea democratically electing to re-annex itself to Russia.
A massively fraudulent election where the two choices were yes or yes but later. Next question.
Wow, that I didn't expect it to end right there. Okay, this is from Mr. Saxokid again. This is the best comment. Mod God Dylan, undisputed champion of the world. Thank you for my daily ego boost. Next question. Jason Turner. At Adam, this is for you, Adam. Not crapping on your neighbor's lawn is not appeasement. It is called understanding boundaries. Connor is the only person making sense here.
Well, I empathize with you and whatever brain damage you're suffering. Okay, I'm being a bit mean. I'm sorry. No, actually, not scrapping on other people's carpets. Like, dude, no. Like here, Russia instigated. Like that's the whole thing. Like here, Russia shits on your carpet and then dares you, right? So like, yeah, I shit on the carpet. But what now, motherfucker? I got nukes. So you got that. I think the other way around.
Okay, this is from Jason Turner. Destiny, what does Melina's boyfriend think?
Good question.
Great question. Well, what does he think?
I don't know. I'll have to go turn on our stream and ask him.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, this is for Justus. This is from Vish. Justus, how long was your essay at the beginning? Was it a 5-page essay or just a 5-paragraph essay?
Are we just reading this shit-talking comments? What the fuck?
I'm sorry.
It was 1,300 words.
Okay.
Jesus.
Hey, Destiny got one. Justus had to get one, right? You gotta be an impartial moderator. Okay. This is 1 second. Okay. Drill Dr. Ill.
Obama.
Are Connor and Justus willing to admit that Putin came to power by doing blatantly false flag apartment bombings to start the Second Chechen War? Wow, that's a very controversial.
Didn't say Simon Says.
As soon as the people in the United States are willing to admit that George W. Bush stayed in power in his second term using false flag attacks on 9/11.
Wait, first of all, the whataboutism into the 9/11 trutherism, that was a brave turn. We just like pivoted like 3 times, like so hard. That was insane. I actually respect the fuck out of that answer. That's okay.
Okay, then I guess we're just moving on.
We are.
Okay, Didymus, for the Russian side, which I assume is referring to Justus, why do these countries want to join NATO in the first place?
Good question.
Wow. I wish we knew.
Again, why Central and Eastern European countries would want to join NATO is self-evident. Why NATO would want them to join is not quite as obvious.
Wait, can we speculate? In order to join NATO, every single country has to be on board with them joining. Like when you say it's self-evident why they would join, why would they join?
Central European and Eastern European small countries
why would
on
these
the border
people,
of a large superpower?
Why would they want? It almost sounds like. Now, I don't want to misconstrue what you're saying, but it almost sounds like you're saying they would want to join because for some reason that large superpower might be like intruding into and fucking with the country. But that couldn't have been what you meant. Was that?
Because there's been 400 years of history between Eastern Europe and Russia of mutual aggression. So yes, there are
mostly Russian genocide and Russian invasion.
Like the invasion of Russian by the Poles or the Lithuanians or the French, like those.
That's kind of ancient history, which is no longer relevant here.
I said 400 years of mutual antagonism from both sides.
Okay, I don't think Napoleon invading Russia is a kind of a factor here. I'm sorry. I think you're reaching a bit. I think sticking here to the 20th century or like late 19th century is a much more useful metric.
The United Kingdom, Japan, and America invading Russia after the fall of the Tsarist regime, that close enough in history for you?
Invading, like, invading, like, what was it, like all these 3 countries, Japan, UK, and what is it, US, they marched their armies to the borders and started taking over and annexing Russian territory and then maintained puppet regimes, etc. Like, what, did that happen anywhere?
Yes.
Really?
And you as an Eastern European, unlike our other American viewers and interlocutors, should know your history a little bit better. You have more cultural memory than this.
Oh, sure. I should look up the famous American and Japanese and English puppet states on Russian territory.
Yeah, and also I like cultural memory is I would argue can be quite short depending on what we're talking about, right? Like this idea that we can go back 400 years to justify any Russian action today. Like how wasn't it like 200 years ago Canada burned down our White House? Like are we gonna go marching into fucking Toronto to steal some of their shit? Like I totally don't buy that. I think that we have to segment history into very specific like regions of time where we can like look at how people behave in certain points. Like you would never go back to the rampant imperialism of, you know, like the thousands to the 1800s or whatever, all through the European continent and go, well, they used to do it then, now we could do it now. Because if that was the case, I'm pretty sure, my history sucks, but I'm pretty sure that literally every single European country can justify like constantly invading and shitting on like France and Great Britain and shit. Like you can do it forever using these types of historical arguments. I think that the states of security of the world and the arrangements change as time goes on.
But
the question wasn't whether or not the historical precedent justifies Russia invading Ukraine or other Eastern European countries. The question was, why would Eastern European countries, Central European countries want to join NATO? I said historical antagonism between the two.
On both sides, but thereby implying that, you know, yes, thereby implying that these historical precedents do, in fact, you know, factor into this current circus. But also, I think
foreign policy decisions on both sides. Absolutely.
Sure. I think it says a lot about our debate here that we can point at like very evident, very contemporary, very clear-cut examples to support our points, and you have to reach back to 400 years ago.
Chechnya invading Russia in the 90s with United States support.
Okay, we gotta move on.
Okay, no, just move. Go.
Okay. This is from Mike B. Justus's argument that Ukraine is a Nazi country seems shaky at best. Can he rattle off a quick justification?
Justus never said that Ukraine is a Nazi country. Justus said that part of the governing coalition in Ukraine now, a significant part of the military or militarized portion of that coalition has troubling Nazi associations, and that this is very troubling.
How big of a part?
This is very troubling in the Russian context. They're trying to when they're trying to assess foreign policy risks and set agendas. So it is an issue. It's not the issue, and it's definitely not saying that Ukraine is a Nazi regime. I never said that, and I would not support that.
Sure, but like, okay, first off, yeah, I bet Russia is worried that like they might get some like, competition in the Nazi shit. But otherwise, like, I really want to know this because I want to know, honestly. I never ever get a clear answer to this from like pro-Russian people. What percentage or what portion of the Ukrainian military is Nazi?
And it doesn't even have to be exact, like just like a ballpark. Are we saying like 50%? Are we saying like 0.1%, like ballpark?
We're talking about in the order around 10%.
No shot.
Around 10%.
They have 200,000 active military personnel. So the whole Svoboda party has 1,500 members, but there are more members than that.
The Ukrainian army has, the Ukrainian securities forces, the Ukrainian army has somewhere around 200,000 active members. And the combined overtly Nazi militias are somewhere around 16,000, just under 10%.
Who are the avowed? First of all, I don't think they technically have like paramilitary militias anymore, right? They were all incorporated in 2014 into the armed services proper. But aside from the Azov battalion, are there other like prominent, like that used to be huge militias that are all like Nazis? Or what are we defining as Nazi here?
Yeah, you might want to back that up with the source.
Or I won't even be that mean. I'm just curious, like who are you referring to?
Anyway.
Like,
yeah, I'm not. I don't have the links like right under my hands to send into the chat, but look into it. Look into the overt Nazi fascist militias that have been very active in the Donbass region since 2014. No, they were not
on the Russian side, definitely.
They were not all incorporated into the Ukrainian military. And again, this is not a major point that I'm trying to rest on. I'm simply saying that,
if you believe that 10%
taking
of the military are Nazis.
Taking into consideration the incursion of Chechen rebels into Russia in the 90s and how devastating and terrible that was, when you have proto-Nazi groups on your borders, it's troubling.
Sure, just real quick. This is about the U.S., so it'll be intuitive. So ISIS, I believe we can agree that ISIS existed in its peak form due to foreign meddling, due to U.S. invasion, right? Because I would say to some extent same with the Taliban, because foreign invasions give this sort of major boost to these like far right crazies in all countries. So if Russia is worried about Ukrainian Nazis from a Realpolitik perspective, wouldn't it make sense not to invade, because that just tends to galvanize far right people and like tends to give a huge boost to these far right militias? It seems to me that Russia was
you asked a question, I'm answering. You asked a question, I'm answering. You asked a question, I'm answering.
Please go ahead.
It seems to me that you and our viewers are confusing pro-peace position and pro-Russian. I again started my opening comments with the invasion of Ukraine is an unjustified aggression. And it's a tragedy, and I condemn it, and I'm risking prison time by condemning it inside of Russia. I am not pro-war in this situation, but to be not pro-war and to say at the same time that I see a history of antagonism that has brought us to this point are two different things. So this is the thing that would it be better for Russia to have not invaded Ukraine? Absolutely, without question.
Sure, but here the pro-peace position is the pro. Anyway, sorry, Dylan, go ahead.
No, this comment's much more important, Adam. This is from Kasim. Adam, nothing but lies. why are you running from Haas and Jackson on this topic? You lied and said they backed out. The DMs prove otherwise.
That's so funny. Like, the originally we were supposed to debate. I think the like infrared and Hinky, Jason Hinkle or what's his name, and
Tinkle.
Sprinkle, yeah, Hinky Dinky. Anyway, like both of them, like, and then and then I got this email from James, like, hey Adam, like a day before the debate or something. Hey Adam, I'm so bummed to say, but like, I despite my best efforts to persuade them, like they just like canceled like Infra and Hinky Dink. And it's like, okay, well, and then I started getting these like screenshots of them. Afterwards I made a YouTube post without like a community post without ever mentioning them. Like, dude, like, am I really that scared? Like, how come these dumbasses like won't debate me? And then like I started getting these like screenshots of them just like molding on Twitter that like it was actually me who canceled, which is not true. Hey, Infra Hinky Dink, if you want to debate about Ukraine, I'm fully open to it. Just don't bitch out next time, okay?
Okay.
Also beta.
Next is from Branchy Moore. I'm just going to call him Branchy Moore. Will Justus and Connor, sadly Connor's not here, tell us their take on the Russian invasion of Afghanistan? That the war did much more damage in the 10 years than America's war in 20, killed up to 2 million and displaced millions more.
Ooh.
There was no Russian invasion of Afghanistan. You should look at your history a little bit better.
Soviet invasion, yeah, that's what they meant.
Oh, Soviet invasion. So yes, there was a Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and
just to put you back on track.
And just as I condemned the United States invasion of Afghanistan, the United States of Iraq, and the other United States invasions, for peace.
Fantastic. The next question is Adam. What is the reason that the Baltics joined NATO?
I don't know. Jesus, maybe it's because like Russia was like too friendly, and they were like, I don't know, just like afraid of like Russia's love and friendship that they bestow on their neighboring countries. I don't know. I think I just need to look into it.
Next one. This is from Alex Paris Lobel. This is for Justus. It says Justus and Adam, but I think this is more directed towards Justus. Could you elaborate on how modern Russia is/isn't a fascist state? No, quoting, it learned from its mistakes.
All right. I would say go find a good definition of a fascist state before you throw those allegations around.
Sure. While Russia is fascist, so it has used ethno-nationalist propaganda and ethno-nationalist talking points to justify the invasions of Ukraine and also all other countries. When invading Ukraine on the eve of the invasion, Putin essentially made a blood and soil speech where he justified the invasion based on ethnic terms. Just like Hitler did with the Sudeten and etc. Also in Russia, there's this rabid state-sponsored nationalism across the country. It's extremely traditionalist. Gays are basically like hunted or second-class citizens at best. In Chechnya, there have been actually some like actual people with guns going out to like kill gay people. It's extremely traditionalist, obsessed with this national plot. Ukraine is both weak and strong. It's both this pathetic little rump state and this overwhelming threat that they should stop, otherwise Russia will be in danger.
I think
it's all there.
I think it's too easy of a question. Here's a really hard question that I would like to hear answered. How is Russia not a fascist state? What does Russia do that it's like, man, that's something that Russia does that definitely isn't fascist?
Oh yeah.
I'm curious for Justus. Do you have an answer to that? Like what like, because it has every indication of a fascist state. I think, I don't even know if that's controversial to say. Like,
I think that when you're trying to prove a point and you have a positive position, you are the one who needs to provide evidence, not the other way.
Well, sure.
around.
So Adam said it, right? You have like a highly ethnically oriented country. You had the whole, it sounds like Adam is referencing the, or actually there was a speech by Putin. There was that accidental publishing of the document once Ukraine was supposedly liberated to take it over, where it's essentially like we are a kindred spirit. We have similar people. A lot of the justifications given for actions in Georgia, in Ukraine is look at all of the ethnic Russian people here. We have to defend our ethnic Russians. This top-down push for this like nationalistic, hyper-Russian spirit. You've got something Adam didn't mention: the complete and total alignment of all of your corporate sector with the government via the oligarchical controls that these families have over the country. How is it not a fascist regime?
So the bringing up of Putin's speech on the eve of the invasion and his arguments for blood and soil is bringing up a single instance of rabble rousing as proof of a system, much like, for instance, liberals in the United States bring up Donald Trump's rabble rousing as proof that he was also a fascist regime. I don't think that either of those constitute such evidence. Russia has over 70 different ethnic peoples inside of its borders. Most of them have autonomous republics, which give them large amount of freedom in ruling themselves and having their ethnic language spoken inside of their own borders and chartering their own economic policy. I live in what's called the Altai Territory, which is a Russian state. And next to us is the Altai Republic, which is ethnically Altaian. And they speak Altai there. They teach Altai language in the schools. They are definitely not under the boot of some fascist regime. So that would be my counter.
Before you read it anymore.
Yes, go ahead.
And
did you want to finish that?
And this is again not the debate portion. This is the question and answer portion.
Anyway, I just wanted to like quickly as a brief aside, because I think it's very interesting. So I don't think Justus really wants to get into this. Look, Russia has been based on like ethnic supremacy and expansionism in all directions for like a long while. Alexander Pushkin is the best example. Like if you look at what he wrote about like
we're going back to the 1900s. We're going back to the 1800s again, Adam. Like the United States.
In this case, it is directly relevant. Whereas the Indians, the
annexation of Texas,
have absolutely nothing to do with this. Whereas we're talking about Russia now, and the fact that Pushkin was a foundational
compare apples to apples.
Compare. No. Yes, I am.
Compare
yes.
1800. Compare 1800 America to 1800 Russia.
We're not talking about America. We are not talking about America right now. Just okay. These look. These whataboutisms. Like who are you even trying to convince?
It's a historic argument that Pushkin provides context for current Russian imperialism. Then a historic argument for manifest destiny is a argument for current American imperialist ambitions. They are analogous.
Got me. Damn.
Okay. Let me just say before you guys continue, I just want to let everybody know in the chat that we are going a little extra long on the Q&A tonight because this is a charity event. We're donating 100% of the super chats to Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome. So that's why our gracious interlocutors have agreed to stay behind and take your questions a little bit longer. But I'm going to go ahead and issue a warning at this point now. The last super chat was from Cup of Tea. So at this point, any more super chats, I'm not going to try to push to get those read. I mean, if we go on and the interlocutors do want to stay and read more, that's fine. But at this point, I'm not going to try to. So like that last one that just came in, yeah, that's not going to be necessarily going to get read. So I'm just letting you guys know that. And any of the questions that were sent that weren't super chats, I'm sorry, but we probably won't have time to read those tonight.
Okay.
So with that, go ahead.
Well, one thing, I still have like 4 or 5 from my chat that were donated before that. Is it okay if I shove them into them out?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Fantastic. Let me go to the next one for Destiny and Adam. This is from Victor. Do you think the West may have not provoked Russia, but didn't de-escalate aggressively enough? They clarify that they're just playing devil's advocate.
I think that Biden actually did a phenomenal job at laying out very clearly the scope of what U.S. involvement would be at the beginning. The United States has never made any indication that there were going to be NATO troops on the ground or that there were going to be U.S. troops on the ground. We have continually rejected Zelensky's request for there being a no-fly zone. I think the United States has done a pretty good job at being responsible at setting out exactly the scope of how we'll provide assistance to Ukraine. Also, the counterfactual that is nobody really wants to deal with is the idea that Western aggression was the reason why Russia ever invaded invaded is just a myth. But unless we think that like Russia just happened to roll in and take over Crimea from Sevastopol, they just happened to do that after Euromaidan, or that they just happened to be building up troops and getting ready for war, just as a civil war in eastern Ukraine is hopefully on its way towards winding down after 8 years of Russian-backed conflict. Like, these aren't random things that are happening. Or, I'm sorry, these aren't things that are happening because of like NATO aggression. Like Justus has literally said, the idea of that membership action plan, I think, was floated to Ukraine. Oh, Jesus. What? It was like back in the 2000s, I think. Like, this has been a conversation topic for a long time. The idea,
2008, I think.
2008, yeah. The idea that this was the same war that they went to, the same year they went to war with Georgia. The idea that this happened in response to a NATO plan is just not true. It was very clearly happening because Russia didn't have the control that it wanted over Ukraine, and it wanted to punish Ukraine for rejecting, whether it was their economic policies or further on, because it was rejecting the breakaway parts of the two states to the east.
Yeah, I mean, so far, like all the West has done is like try to de-escalate somehow while also keeping Ukraine alive. Like this is the balancing act, right? Like, don't let Ukraine lose. I'm sorry, don't let Ukraine lose, and also don't step over the line of like NATO engagement with Russia, because that might just lead to nuclear war.
And if you take a very narrow view of this from like February 10th. Of 2022, then yes, this is correct. If you take a broader view, which I'm saying, let's look not at ancient history or Pushkin, but let's look at least the last 20 years, you'll see a different story. The annexation of Crimea is in response to a military overthrow, a violent coup, a violent overthrow of the democratically elected government of Ukraine. The Georgian War is in reaction to Georgia invading North Ossetia, where Russia had troops posted.
Wait, what was the military coup? I don't know what that is. What is the military coup? Are you talking about when Yanukovych fled the country?
There were no military tribunals set up. There wasn't like a foreign-backed military.
They held an election afterwards.
Yeah.
Violent overthrow of the government. Just like they had an election after.
The interim government.
How is it they had an election, just like they had an election after the annexation of Crimea. Very similar.
Absolutely not. Hold on. The annexation of Crimea was held at gunpoint by the Russian military that was there, where, as Adam said earlier, the two options were, do you want to join us, or do you guys want to have like your own election where your parliament is full of people that will vote to join us? There was no option there to remain a part of Ukraine, number one. And number...
you're wrong.
What do you mean I'm wrong?
You're wrong because this is a point that the Western media often gets wrong, and it has to do with not understanding internal Russian and even Ukrainian political speech. So the options in Crimea were remain in Ukraine as an autonomous republic, very much like the Altai Republic just across the ridge from me, where I'm sitting, is still part of Russia, but it is an autonomous republic. It has greater liberties than, say, a state or a county. That was option one. Option two was annexed to Russia. And both German and United States funded polling agencies, after the annexation was accomplished, went in and did re-polling to assess whether or not the referendum was even close to being realistic in its numbers. And they both came out in the positive, in the affirmative, that yes, those were actually real numbers that we saw in the referendum.
No, I'm sorry. Very quickly. The two options on the referendum were like, A, do you want to be part of Russia, or B, do you support the restoration of the 1996 Crimean Constitution, which was, by the way, the 1996, I believe it was, Constitution specified Crimea to be independent, and then there was an amendment later to the Constitution which then specified that independent Crimea is part of Ukraine. But the referendum actually did not specify which version of the Constitution it's referring to. So after that, the Russians could have just said, "Oh yeah, by the way, we referred to the original one." So Crimea is now independent, full of pro-Russian politicians, by the way. Oh, and would you look at that? 1 month down the line, they have submitted the request to get annexed. Also, by the way, no, actually, that's it for now.
So democratic elections are good when they favor the outcomes that you like, bad when they do not favor the outcomes.
No,
Oh, wait, I want to hear.
No, elections are not. One sec. Elections are not democratic when they are held at gunpoint. So if you look at this from Russia's perspective, what if everything you say is true, right? And the options really were like Russia or Ukraine. What if people vote for? What if people vote for Ukraine? Do the Russian soldiers just go, okay, I guess we're going home? Fuck no, dude. Are you kidding me? This is Realpolitik. Crimea was going to Russia one way or the other, regardless of the result. Destiny?
Yeah, and I was going to say also, are we really saying that the elections that were observed by literally the entire world that happened with the interim government after Euromaidan, after the revolution, that those elections were of the same level of integrity as the elections that were held at gunpoint in Crimea? Like,
I believe the tribunal, I think at The Hague or some like a higher organization like that called it a complete farce of democracy.
also, wasn't there? I don't know if this was true or not because didn't they release?
You guys are probably on. I just wanted to be able to respond.
Sure.
I want one little minute, and then we can move on to the next question. Absolutely. The elections in Ukraine after Euromaidan, that were internationally recognized and observed. I have no contention with those, and I would say to my Russian, friends and acquaintances, we have to move on from 2014. That would be a thing, but to not recognize that these things are analogous and that sponsoring and helping a violent overthrow of the democratically elected at that time government as antagonism toward Russia is, again, it's having too narrow of a view on the effects of our actions in the area, in the region.
I guess I just got a viewer question. Oh my God. And they donated to you, but you guys didn't get the super chat. And the viewer question asked, what was the violent overthrow of Yanukovych? The Euromaidan protests had been happening for months. The viewer wants you to specify where was the violent overthrow of Yanukovych. And he says in the thing, are you talking about when Yanukovych fled the country because he was scared of being persecuted for having his police officers shoot and kill protesters during the end of the Euromaidan protests? That's what he asked.
Yeah, the entire Euromaidan protest was turned into a violent overthrow of the government. Absolutely. And yes, he did flee the country, and yes, he was a lesser man than Zelensky and a lesser politician. A better politician might have been able to steer out of those waters, but to not admit that it was a violent overthrow, that it was just all peaceful and wonderful, is, again, it's completely insane, and it doesn't jive with the reality of the facts on the ground.
The donut rest his case.
Very, very slick move, doesn't he? Okay, we're gonna slide through these things very quickly. Okay, from Mr. Monster, Putin has no good reason to attack Ukraine. He is essentially a Bond villain. Soy movie reference. Next one, Ryan Rockwell. As a former professional carpet cleaner, does Destiny have any input on the carpet shitting analogy?
I don't even know what that's. Is this a reference I'm supposed to know?
Yeah, it was from earlier in the debate. Don't worry about it. From Destiny's mom, Steven, I need you to bring all of your sweatpants downstairs so I can clean them. You're doing great, by the way. I'm proud of you.
Thanks.
Congratulations, Steven. Throwing it over to Ash, what could the West have done differently? I guess it's just a general question.
More support earlier, more deterrence, dissuade Russia from even attacking. That way we can avoid the war.
Not expand NATO in 1997, 1988, 1999, and further, and promote a Central European, Eastern European security environment, modeled much like after Austria in the post-World War II era.
Okay. For the pro-Russian side, I assume he just means Justus. If this is from
pro-peace,
pro-peace, but just that's what they said. I read them verbatim. This is from Sill in Holland. If England reinvaded Ireland because there was civil unrest in Northern Ireland, would you support it?
I don't support the invasion of the Ukraine.
Okay, very simple. This is Heckland from Heckland. For AdamSomething, as a train enjoyer, has the Russian use of trains for supply convoys dampened your enjoyment of them?
No, because they also get blown up. Plus, the Ukrainians also have nice trains.
Okay.
But thank you for the question.
Victor Halleck, $5 for Destiny.
Just real quick.
Yeah.
Interject here real quick. That's I had requested Modern Day Debate originally to have a one-on-one debate with AdamSomething
and then that was what turned into this particular debate. And I started watching AdamSomething because he liked trains, and he tricked me into watching his channel because it was Adam S, and I thought it was Adam Smith about trains.
Damn.
Wow. Trivia.
You tricked him.
Victor Halleck, $5 for Destiny and Adam. Have you considered that Russia is trying to start its own NATO?
Well, I mean, there's talk of the is it called the Union State? I think was the goal for Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine to all kind of be part of their own little, I guess, like federated union or whatever. But I mean, yeah, they might be trying it. But also something that was mentioned earlier, I believe the idea of NATO. Fuck, I'm not Adam or even Justus might know more this, but the idea of Russia joining NATO, I think, was floated to Putin, and I thought that Putin just didn't want to go through the process because he thought it was like an insult to Russia to have to like wait in line and to like wait for all the acceptance of it. They wanted us to like roll the red carpet out for them.
Oh yeah, that's actually true. Like Russia could have been part of the Western sort of power structure. They just like refused because like, you know, fuck it, we're empire, we're big dick boys. And look where they got them.
Not true. Russia in the late 90s and the early 2000s several times made overtures to the West about Russia being part of NATO, and they were flatly denied.
No, the denial was that, okay, the guys,
I will leave it up,
going to go
and
immediately. The denial was that it's going to have to be a process. Anyway.
And I'd leave it up to the viewers to research that.
Oh, please do.
Okay. I don't know what this means, so maybe one of you guys can give me some levity on this. Thoughts on Paul Joseph Watson's comments? I don't know what that means.
Somebody tweeted out some wild shit about some shit he said, I guess. I don't know. It's pretty crazy, but...
Okay, keep going then. This is from Ethan Steinberg, and this is for Justus. Should the United States stop providing weapons to Ukraine?
Question of whether or not the United States should be currently providing weapons to the Ukraine is a little bit like the question of whether or not the United States should enter World War II after, you know, the Nazi Germany has taken over all of Europe or most of Europe and has invaded the Soviet Union. The question isn't what we should or shouldn't be doing now. The question is what we should or shouldn't have been doing to avoid this inevitable conclusion of events in 97, in 98, and throughout the 2000s. Our own foreign policy establishment warned us in 97, 98, 99, when Clinton was beginning to escalate or expand NATO, that this was what was going to happen. The same foreign policy establishment that helped us win the Cold War warned the Clinton administration that this was the inevitable result of NATO expansion. So, should the West help Ukraine? And again, I'm putting myself into some pretty dangerous position here, but trying to answer this honestly. But should the West help the Ukraine rebuff the Russian invasion? At this point in the game, I don't think there's any other option. We should look for exits. We should try to find overtures for peace. But of course, you know, you don't want a land war in Europe, obviously. Like that's. But on the same time, this is what my whole point is. Let's look at the broader picture and look at what led to this, not just looking at this. Again, it's the question of should we have tried? Should the Treaty of Versailles have been different, and might that have helped mitigate the World War II or not allow for it, as opposed to whether or not we should get involved in World War II.
Yeah, careful with the answers. I hear in fascist countries there's a risk that you might go to jail if you say the wrong things on air. So, next question.
I missed that. Was that a question, Adam? There was breaking
no.
going on.
No, nothing. Irrelevant.
Next question. This is from Ki. What are your thoughts on Western generals like Mr. George Bush and Mr. Girl's imperialist actions against Russia? I think that's for Justus.
It was Mr. George Bush, girls, something breaking up.
Oh, sorry. Okay, let me say
It's
that
a dumb meme question. Go to the next one.
Okay, got it. Okay. Next question. A little off topic. This is from Vish. But what do you all think this could mean for China and Taiwan?
I feel like the situation between China and Taiwan is markedly different. Like the relationship between Taiwan and China, and whether that is like a truly independent country, which is not in the way that Ukraine was from 91 onwards. I think the situations are dissimilar. I don't think you can compare the two.
Yeah, agreed.
I think they're dissimilar, but I think that there are lessons being learned, and I think at one degree, the Chinese are seeing what the international community's response might be to something like a reassessing of power over Taiwan, and hopefully, taking notes.
Okay. Actually, I just finished a video on this that I'm going to release this Thursday. So if anybody wants to watch that, of course, DylanBurns TV on YouTube. Shameless plug. Next one, Mr. Saxakete for $20. Will the real Kremlin gremlin please stand up? Please stand up. Oh my God, he's standing. Goddamn, Haas is short. Amazing. Next one.
Didn't say Simon.
OG
Adam
Snoop.
is sitting.
Yes, Adam is the Kremlin gremlin. OG Snoop. So slavery didn't play a role in shaping the South of today. What a dumb point of view. Slavery did shape Jim Crow and current economic segregation.
I think you tuned into the wrong
Absolutely.
debate or something.
Okay.
Anyway.
Next is from Ambient Wave. With rumors of Putin soon to announce full-scale military mobilization, how would this development affect the current conflict in Ukraine?
I don't think that will happen. It might, there's a chance, but actually, okay, complicated question. Russia, short answer, Russia has had enough troubles with their trained forces already, right? I mean, they fucked up enough with them, like especially with the VDB, and to order a full-scale countrywide mobilization, that would take months to train up people, and to be actually to train them up to at least to be marginally battle ready, to send them in, and then we haven't even talked about morale issues, supply issues, hardware, etc. Plus the sanctions effect on the Russian military-industrial complex. Also, in Russia, the funny situation is that they would also need to train the trainers and to train the conscripts that they would get. So mass mobilization might happen, although it's not going to have a substantial effect on the war in Ukraine.
AdamSomething likes to point out Russian ineptitude in the Ukraine and likes to make funny posts about Russian equipment looking funny, and that's ha ha ha.
There's so much of it.
Like that. But the reality is that Russia, in its invasion of Ukraine, has made the mistake that large countries often make when they do not assess their opponent correctly, much like the United States North in the Civil War, where they thought they would have the war over in 2 or 3 weeks, and it took 4 to 5 years. So will Russia declare war on Ukraine? There are both pros and cons of that. The pros of that would be that they could legitimately then use their conscript army. Again, this is another propaganda from the West. Russia doesn't have a conscript army as much as it has mandatory service. And part of the law around mandatory service is that you cannot use the people who are the men who are in the army for mandatory service in wars that are outside of Russia's borders. So there's definitely a pro argument to declaring war so you can use the vast majority of the reserves to advance the war in the Ukraine. That is the pro. The con is that would go against the particular propagandistic narrative that is in Russia right now, which is this is not a war, this is an internal conflict between brother nations, and this is a special military operation, and it's just tactical. That would totally belie that narrative, and so there's definitely a con to doing that. I definitely, of course, as the pro-peace party in this debate, hope that Russia does not declare war and does not use its conscript army. If the war drags out long enough, Russia will win. It is unless the Western powers actually put troops on the ground, which then we'll have a lot of other things to worry about than whether Ukraine will fall or not.
Well, I guess we'll see.
Okay. This next one is from Gambi. This is 100 Czech krona, which either is a lot of money or not a lot of money. I have
about
no
$4.
amazing. For the pro-Russia side, which I mean, I assume means you, are we supposed to believe Russia is intervening to prevent fascism when the same lie was used before by the Soviet Union to justify its invasion of Hungary and Czechoslovakia?
Russia has legitimate history issues with fascism, and so it's an absolutely ready-made propaganda piece when you have fascist militias doing war on your borders. Like it's ready-made. So of course that's part of the propaganda. No, Russia did not invade Ukraine to stop fascist brigades. It's part of the propaganda. It's part of the narrative, and it's part of the whole issue that you have to take into consideration. The main reasons for the invasion of the Ukraine was legitimate security concerns, advancement of NATO, Western orienting countries in the buffer zone around Russia. That is the issue.
Okay. The next question is, this is from a Ukrainian, Stanji. Justus, you are simply wrong. All battalions were either disbanded or integrated into the Ukrainian armed forces by 2017.
I said I countered to Destinies in 2014. They were integrated. I said they were not integrated in 2014. Мой дорогой друг, я не прав. Я прав. Прости, что говорю на русском. Говорил бы на украинском, если мог.
What?
I kind of understood that.
He called you a beta, Destiny. Going to the next one. This is from Streaks. $10. Can Justus comment on the Wagner Group, the Russian PMC group that is essentially an unofficial wing of the Russian military, whose leader is a confirmed neo-Nazi founder, I believe. I don't know if they're the current leader still.
Being an pro-Russian ethnic nationalist is not the same as a historical neo-Nazi. That's A. But B, the Wagner Group and its reason is, like the entire war, unjustifiable, and Russia is playing with fire, with its own stuff. So this is absolutely, it's bad stuff. No good.
Okay, next one. Darth Else. Can I ask a personal question?
To who?
Yeah.
Justice. Okay. I think a lot of people have seen like the tattoo, right? Like the with the. With
I have no tattoos. I'm a clean.
No, not you.
I'm
About the founder of the Wagner Group, with the SS and the swastika with the Nazi eagle. What is that about?
What a great question.
That is a good question. But again, I would say that it's about. Wait a second. I was just not aware of that. I guess.
It's an
flat-footed on that one.
It's an ironic SS symbol.
So there's a very
not.
famous photo of the leader of the Wagner Group with his shirt off, and you can see a swastika with a Nazi eagle and an SS tattoo. Maybe, I mean, I've seen it like a million times. Maybe it's a fake, and I have not been made aware of it.
No.
But I've been.
Dylan,
the reason why people don't usually take it too seriously is because
The question
he
was
was a subscriber of J-Rag.
Wait, yeah, I would like to hear the response. I'm generally curious, by the way.
Two points on that one. Number one, I'm not here to defend the Wagner Group and the work of paramilitary groups in the Donbass and Lugansk region, Russian paramilitary groups. That's unjustifiable. I don't justify it. I don't think it's right. Number one. Okay. So I'm not so familiar with their history and the exact political affiliations of that group. Although I am aware, I even had, unfortunately, acquaintances who went to fight in the Donbass and Lugansk region. So I'm at least to that degree familiar with the situation. Number two, it feels like you are definitely violating the neutrality of the platform by asking such questions.
I'm sorry. I was just definitely curious. I did want to ask before if I could ask a question. I'm very sorry, but we can continue. This is from Darth Elsa again. Considering Russia has completely surrounded Mariupol, maybe the threat of the Azov Nazi super soldiers is exaggerated. We've kind of been over this like a million times. Can we just keep going? I think we can just keep going, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. This is from Translucent Man. Isn't Russia to blame for the anti-Russian sentiment in many of the ex-Soviet countries? Does decades of subjugation of those nations and people not count as Russian provocation?
Absolutely. And so Eastern European and Central European countries who want to be part of a security alliance or security regime of some kind that can keep them out of the militaristic influence of their largest neighbor is understandable. Never have I said that those motivations are not understandable. But again, we have to look at both sides of the motivational schema in order to make sense of the world and not repeat mistakes that cause more conflict and not less.
The next one's from AU Studios. Justus said Russia is not fascist, but he's worried about being arrested for not being strongly pro-war / pro-Putin. If they weren't authoritarian, why would they arrest you when you are clearly 99%? I don't know what the end of it says, but you get the gist of the question.
Fascism in general, and Nazism in particular, which is the allegation that's floated most often in modern debates about anything you don't like, it's kind of the go-to whipping boy, is a particular form of right-wing tyranny and authoritarianism. Russia currently is far more authoritarian than our Western counterparts. There's no question about that. Situation of which I'm not necessarily happy. Of course, that's unfortunate that's the path that we have chosen. The Russian people have chosen to follow and to go down. That's unfortunate. But to say that any authoritarian regime is fascist is ridiculous. Authoritarian regime does not a fascist make. There can be left-wing authoritarian regimes, there can be centrist authoritarian regimes, so forth and so on.
Okay. Now we've gone through all of the questions that have been pre-approved. Do we have any time left for the other questions, Kaz?
There was one more from Cup of Tea. They were just asking what is everyone's take on the Uyghurs.
I mean, it's a genocide by China, a far-right regime.
Justus?
It's a genocide by China, much like the war in Yemen, supported by the United States, is a genocide against the Yemenis.
All right.
Okay. Okay. Should we go on to the warning given questions, or?
Well, Destiny's not here. I think we should just go ahead and close it out.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah. I just want to let everybody know, thank you so much for joining us tonight. All of our debaters are linked in the description below, whether you're listening on podcast. So please check them out if you liked what you heard tonight. And please subscribe, because we have more juicy debates coming up for your enjoyment. And I just want to let you know that I want to thank Dylan for helping us put this all together, getting AdamSomething Justus together. Hopefully we have more collaborations in the future. Thank you to Justus, AdamSomething, Destiny, and Connor for being here. So again, like it if you loved it, share if you want to spread it, and subscribe. We have many more debates coming your way. Thank you. Have a great night, and keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. And have a great night, everybody.
Fantastic.
We're out of here.
Good night, everyone. Thank you, guys, and best wishes to James.
Nice job, Justus, for hanging in there for the 2-on-1 at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.